Welcome to Shoreline City Hall. I appreciate all of you being here today. I'm Economic Development Program Manager Nathan Dom. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to our panelists for taking time out of their weekend, Sunday in particular, to be here to support our local creative economy. And you'll be hearing more about them shortly, but I just, again, want to thank them by name. Ade Abaton with Artsois, Melinda Sneed, Shoreline, City of Shoreline Public Art Coordinator. I would not be here, this would not be happening, and a lot of great stuff that we do in the creative economy without my partner in crime, Melinda, so thank you especially for all that you do. Sarah Everett, Jennifer Shelton, Kate Rhodes, and of course Jody Nelson, our moderator and organizer of this event, and others who you'll hear from shortly. But first, I want to introduce Mayor Chris Roberts. Chris Roberts was first elected to the Shoreline City Council in 2009, and previously served as mayor from 2016 to 2017 and was elected mayor again earlier this year. Mayor Roberts serves on the National League of Cities Board of Directors and the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board. He is the chair of the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee and on the SCA board. Mayor Roberts has led numerous initiatives to support the creative economy. In 2019, just one of many examples, he recommended the city develop industry-specific regulations for filmmaking, leading that year to an all-time high of 5 feature-length films being produced right here in Shoreline. Just one of those the smallest actually, of those productions employed 80 people and spent more than $100,000 in Shoreline. And again, that was just a bootstrapped local indie production. So we know what creatives are doing in our town, and we appreciate it, and we see their receipts and how they impact our economy, and it's a big impact. Chris has also supported efforts to relax restrictions to allow vacant commercial spaces to come back into use, the adoption of ground floor commercial requirements for future multifamily buildings, and more. And with that, Mayor Roberts, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nate, for the nice introduction, and thank you, all of you, for being here today. It's really wonderful to be gathered with so many creative and talented individuals here at City Hall, and I know there's some people online, so welcome. If you haven't been to Shoreline, welcome. We are a city that really has embraced art, and we continue to embrace art as part of our city's identity. We know, and I know, that we can have buildings, but art is what makes a community. And it's really important, and we saw this. I don't know if anyone was here on Friday, but going to Krugerberg Garden and seeing the new ADA accessible ramp that was built at the Botanical Garden. There is art sort of sprinkled throughout not only throughout the park, but also in the design of the walkway, where the walkway is designed not only with art embedded within it, on the posts as you turn around, as sort of the ramp down, but art and nature combined, as the developer can design the walkway around trees, and around this one corner there's this snag of a tree that comes up, and the walkway is designed perfectly within it. And then another area, the walkway, the rail sort of juts in, so it just can incorporate around a big tree. And so that's how important art is. My wife, and then yesterday, my wife received a package. It was her birthday yesterday, and she received a package just sort of from her sister-in-law, and it was a coffee mug that said sunshine. And it was like on a rainy day. I mean, those kind of things are what gives people excitement, joy. And so that's what art brings. And it's important that we continue to work to bring art into the community and make sure that we have more and new artists coming up. And we need to, as a city, we do believe in supporting new artists. According to, on the economic side, as Nate will like to say, according to the Department of Commerce, the creative sector is the largest in the nation in Washington state, and the state share of artistic creative culture is 20% of Washington state's economy, contributing nearly $120 billion annually to the state GDP. and in the Pacific Northwest has long been a haven for those who think differently. And the creativity and innovation fuels the region's largest growth industries. Additionally, arts and culture are frequently cited as principal attractions to keep talent in any given region. While many creatives have relocated from Seattle to Shoreline in recent years, the overall employment in arts, entertainment, and recreation in Shoreline just declined over the last few years. But I hope, that our creative economy can grow and flourish right along with the remarkable growth we are seeing in our region. Artists run small businesses and are an important part of our city's economy. Whether artists are maybe full-time, it may be just part-time, but we all know that they are part of and serve as the backbone of our economy. That's why during the pandemic, the City of Shoreline just began a dedicated program of small business outreach in partnership with the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce. And we're proud that one of you here is the president of the chamber, a photographer, an artist running the chamber. One of the key recommendations from the first year of outreach with the chamber was to bring in expert advising for small local businesses. And I'm very glad that we took it and ran with it. We entered into a partnership with the Small Business Development Centers of Washington, or SBDC. For the past few years, we've had a new partner in the SBDC with Jennifer Shelton, who you're going to hear from today. The new Shoreline SBDC office has reported consistently strong results among the more than 100 clients that she has served. Perhaps selfishly, Nate wrote many of these remarks. Perhaps selfishly, we at the city are particularly impressed by the statistic of $5 in new tax revenues from participating business for every $1 invested into the SBDC. But we know that is just a small part of the benefit that comes from supporting small businesses and creatives. As we work together to help the creative economy to recover and thrive, I encourage all of you to continue pushing the boundaries of creativity. Let's collaborate to ensure Shoreline remains a beacon for the arts, a place where innovation thrives and where creativity is the heart of our growing economy. I hope this workshop is valuable, and I hope you will continue to engage with the city to support you in your growth and success. Thank you very much.
I get a different type of microphone. How's that working? Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Jody Nelson. We've introduced everybody a few times today, but we're going to continue to do that and just reveal a little bit more about each of the panelists. I'm Jody Nelson, and I love it how some of our paths are crossing again, because some of you may know me from my days at Chihuly. Some of you may know me from my days as a gallery director. Some of you may know me from my podcast. But my favorite way to introduce myself is that I love making artists money. And Washington State also supports that. And I got a few things to say about that. The creative economy contribution to the state's GDP is 10%. It's 10.3. That's really large for a state. So being able to take workshops like this and host them, I want to say thank you to the City of Shoreline and the Port of Seattle for seeing that and seeing how important it is. When I was putting together the panelists and putting together the vibe for today, Ade had the most beautiful quote, and it fits. She says, "The surprise was not that I'm creative, but rather realizing that creativity is like a plant. It must be nurtured and exposed to the right conditions to grow." I'm really excited to see what the future holds. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ade. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Her status is she recently now works for Seattle Arts and Culture. But before that, she was an engineer. So she's an artist, she is a drummer, engineer, and also worked at the public arts manager for Artswa, and now her new position. So she's responsible for placing art in public places, colleges, universities, and state agencies. Super excited to have her today. Melinda Sneed has been around the city putting art in public places for years. She manages and is the public art coordinator for Shoreline, so she's managing exhibitions, residencies, public art commissions, and artwork maintenance. And at Sound Transit, she integrated art into the transit facilities for 3 counties, King, Pierce, and Snohomish. So you can see the scale of the work that we can go to. We can be here for the newbies, we can be here for the emerging artists, and we can be here for the self-sustaining artists that we have here today and online. Sarah Everett. Sarah Everett is a local artist, and she consults as a real estate arts manager. This is where she leads her corporate clients from start to finish on artwork projects. Alongside her art practice and consulting, she is actively contributing to the arts community by serving on the board of directors for Seattle's Uptown Arts District. It's right downtown. That's where a lot of people see a lot of things. There's a lot of money going in there. You can see some examples here. Jennifer Shelton, now she is our best known secret. She is the ninja up here with helping you with some business acumen, okay? She brings over 20 years experience as a technical assistant advisor and firsthand experiences because she's had a small business herself. And areas of focus with her are going to be advising into leadership development, increasing profitability. Perhaps you want to buy a business, some great marketing strategies, and some cash flow. Kate Rhodes. Kate Rhodes is here today. She is also an artist. She has worked on a public scale, but Kate creates glass sculptures, limited edition jewelry, public artworks that reflect her relationship with the ocean and its ecosystems. She's won numerous awards and residencies, including a Fulbright scholarship where she traveled to Venice, Italy. It's kind of a big deal because glass is really done by the men and has been handled through men and their families for centuries. So she's been able to break a few glass ceilings and has captured audiences around the world, including the audiences in Tacoma at the Pacific Seas Aquarium. I would like just to take one more second and have everybody on the panel just say a word or two and hopefully one goal that they have to be able to teach you here today. For you.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So good morning, afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm both an artist and an arts administrator, and I think I can share the pieces of working at a state level or at the city level. What are we looking like oftentimes when we're putting artist portfolios in front of committees, and what are they trying to, what are they resonating with in order to pick an artist for that kind of work? So I can bring that. But selfishly, I'm also an artist, so I'd love to learn from the rest of y'all too.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melinda Sneed. I'm the public art coordinator for the city of Shoreline. I advocate for and facilitate public art in our community spaces to enhance cultural vibrancy, which also includes taking care of the artwork that we commission, maintaining the permanent public art collection and the portable works collection. Also, in my own right, I'm an artist. I'm a puppeteer and a celebration artist, which means I make very large art for parades and other community celebrations. And my goal for this particular workshop is to empower you with practical knowledge to take the next steps in your artistic journey and provide insight into navigating the public art opportunities while staying true to your artistic vision.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sarah Everett. I have been an artist always, and I've ended up in this position I am now because I've also had a long-standing day job in real estate development, and out of that have come opportunities to be an advocate for artists, getting placement for permanent installs in buildings. And out of that, word spread among this very tight-knit community of developers and people building real estate in Seattle. And we're talking like mostly multifamily housing, commercial projects. And a lot of these developers may have the intention there, but they don't always understand how to bring art in a way that will meet their budget goals. So often I stand as a advocate for artists and also a translator between the artistic world and the development world, because they don't always speak the same language. So I work to enable projects to happen by translating that, yes, you can figure out a path forward, both for the artist and for the developer. And so I am hoping to empower everyone here to see your work in a way that could be applied to a multifamily building or a commercial space in a way that maybe you haven't thought about before. That feels like a big goal, but also there's so much opportunity and there's so many ways that art can be applied in a building that isn't always just a painting hung on a wall or a sculpture in a front entryway. There's so many different ways. And so that's something that I love to push developers on and push engineering teams and architects to bring art in, because all it does is enrich the building, the community, the neighborhood, and arts in our city. So.
Absolutely, and as the mayor was saying, art helps the community, and as Ade says, it's you can rewrite some of those histories in the community with the right artwork. You know, artwork can really help shift your thinking. So with that, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Shelton. In my career advising small business owners, I have worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs over the past 2 decades, all around helping them increase sales or reach their goals. And in general, we're all selling something. And I truly believe the world needs what you all have to offer. What you are selling is an experience, a feeling, a different perspective, a different way of seeing the world that might resonate with someone. And my hope for takeaways today is that amidst all the landscape of choices of things that people can buy to make them feel good or have an experience or a different perspective, I want your people to be able to find you. I want you to take some tips away as to how they can find you. And then once they find you, how do you create and maintain a long-term relationship with that client?
Hello, Kate Rhodes, Seattle artist. I'm super interested to be here as well because I want to hear what everyone else has to say. I have less than 10 public art commissions or purchases underneath my belt, so I'm not a big expert. But
Humble.
Yeah, but I really hope for you all to gain from this talk today, better understanding of the application system for public art and recognizing what kind of public art calls will fit your artwork the best so that you don't not waste your time, but sometimes you can apply for a number of things, and it's good to be able to choose what really suits your work and to move forward with that.
Thank you, everyone. Nate, did we have any questions online? This is where I just wanted to take a mini second and just see if there was any questions from y'all before we dive into the dialogue. I have 2 microphones on, so is that one? Hello. The very first question is, navigating the public art commission process. So for new artists to the public art space, what are the key steps in considering for successfully securing public art commissions, from the RFQ, the RFP, let's get into what those mean, all the way to the installation? How can artists ensure their vision aligns with community needs and project requirements? So this question, we're going to start with the panelists. And was that question clear? Okay.
Thank you. So there's a lot in that question, but I'll start with just how can an artist make sure that from start of project to end, your vision aligns with what the community is requesting, right? So I think a lot, I'll back up and say a good project manager or a good program has spent some time even before you are selected as the artist working with the community to say, what do they want? And that's half of it. I know I spend an inordinate amount of time kind of having conversations with, a committee just to understand who is this community. When they say, we'll all say, for example, we want a really creative and diverse, and you go, awesome, what does that mean? And you ask that like 5 times and really dig into what are we trying to, when we use these words that are very common, what does that mean to this particular community? So that by the time an artist is seeing a call for art, some of that is already spelled in there so that you can decide as well, okay, does this align with what I would like to do, right? Does this align with where I am in your career and just where you are in life stage? So I think of those things that, and if that hasn't happened, if you are selected as an artist, ask some of those questions as well. When we're using some of these terms, what does this mean specifically for this community? Because we've all seen the kind of work where you fast forward 5-10 years, and some of those questions maybe were not asked, so that community no longer has any connection with the work. And that is how work ends up being decommissioned. That is how it ends up in storage rooms, and that is how something that someone really poured a lot of sweat and tears into no longer serves a purpose.
Can you add, and pardon me if this annoys any of you, but I feel like I can ask more questions to help draw out some more details. Would something like it can't go into storage for the first 10 years be something you can include into an agreement from the artist standpoint?
Generally, no.
Why?
Well, it depends on what the entity is.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're working at the state level, for example, there are legislative requirements that would say this is how this artwork should be treated. That might differ with the city, the municipality, a private gallery, a private collector. So I think it's also understanding the organization that is putting out the call. What are they looking for? So there's the community, there's the organization, and then there's what you would like to do.
There is. And so just remember, artist, if you know what you can ask for it. And sometimes it may be so your work doesn't go into the storage. Maybe it's they participate in the cleaning of it for the first 2 years and you clean it for the other 2. So, as Sarah said, she wants to empower you with some knowledge. These are some of those points that you can start writing down if you want your art to be in public places. Let's see what Melinda can add.
I'm going to say be thorough and strategic when applying to public art things. Do a little bit of research, dive into those calls for artists because, as she said, we try to be really specific in those calls to artists and give a lot of information so you understand where the site is, why we're doing this project, who we're doing this project for, and then pay attention to the application. What have we asked you to send us? If we've asked you to make sure that everything's named a certain way, that's probably so it doesn't take us a lot of time to organize all those materials to give it to a selection panel. What else?
May I add something to that? That's
Sure.
a real thing. If you send a JPEG file that is SJ27 and 93 letters after that, and you send it to us, how are we supposed to identify that later to put it into a presentation, to put it into the right file, to help you as best we can name your files?
Yeah, and
With your-
generally calls will say how they want things named specifically for that reason. Ensure that your application aligns with the objective of the call. If it has nothing to do with your artwork, it's okay not to apply for that call. Something will come along that aligns with your artwork. Collaboration, once you're selected, engage with the stakeholders, generally the public art administrator, will have a list of people that you can talk to. And as you're talking to them, you might even find more people to talk to about the area and learn more about the specific site. And prepare. Always prepare for your conversations you're going to have with community. Prepare for stakeholder meetings. A lot of those happen in public art commissions. Design reviews, be ready for those. They're going to look at your work. Sometimes they're not kind. It doesn't have to do with who you are as an artist. They're trying to give feedback. When you're doing installations, thoughtfully prepare for those. Do all of your logistics. Think of all the things that you may not even need to think about, but try to think about as many things as you can. And stay flexible. You'll hear a lot of feedback. Things will change sometimes, and a lot of times public art projects are aligned with construction projects. And sometimes those construction projects timelines move. They move ahead, we have to do things faster. They move farther away, and we have to just sit around and wait. It doesn't have a reflection on your art. It has a reflection on the project that we're connected with. And at the end of the process, remember that the goal is to create a fantastic artwork and that resonates with you as an artist and that resonates with the community.
I'm not sure how to follow all. That was so many nuggets of wisdom and
It was.
many things that I was going to bring forth as well. I made notes. You know, I did, but I did not print them out, so that was my fail.
Yeah, and this is where I love the panel because you're working for a developer. You're not
Right.
necessarily working for a state agency.
But a lot of the same things apply.
Yes.
So one point I will bring up that something was I had a note that I wanted to share is even if you're reading a call and someone's asking for, you know, for a building example, I might ask for, I want abstract art. And it's already been talked through with the community, the neighborhood, the stakeholders for what we're looking for in the building. And if you're a figurative artist, but for some reason you feel connected to the project in a different way and you see a path forward for how your art could connect to what's being asked, even if your portfolio doesn't align, you can start with a statement as to how you could see the connection being made. Like basically just be really clear and illustrate how you could see the connection. Because I've had sometimes we've hired someone who it wasn't necessarily apparent in their existing portfolio, but they had a really good project idea and they sketched out a really good idea of how they could meet the call. So that's one thing I would add is that does happen. But also to respond to calls that do feel mission aligned for you, feel like they're, you know, if they're asking for metal and you've never done anything in metal, maybe not one you want to pursue just yet. Until maybe you explore a metal project idea.
Especially if you're trying to scale it to something large.
Yeah. I feel like Melinda covered a lot of the same points that I was going to answer to this. So,
So
I
you
will
can
just clarify real quick, RFQ versus RFP.
Thank you.
In the process that I generally work with is I'll put out an RFQ first, where I'm just asking for artists to submit letter of interest and your existing portfolio. So that's not necessarily curated slides yet. It's really just, I'm interested in this project because of X, Y, Z, and here's my past work that relates. And it's that simple. And then from that, we usually have a selection committee that will bring forth finalists, and it ranges on depending on the project, where we will pay those finalists a stipend to develop a proposal. So that's typically the process that I encourage developers to work under, because that, I know from experience, helps them work through what they're looking for, because they can't often envision it from the front end, even with a lot of work and a lot of conversations that happen beforehand. So,
what kind of timelines are we working on from the first time that you put out an RFQ just for the letter of interest to the time something is, then you have another meeting and then?
Yeah, I like to ask for a minimum of, I'll have a kickoff meeting with the stakeholder group and the community, get a sense of what they're looking for and why, and where the placement is and what the restrictions and parameters are around the piece that we possibly consider. I'll put forth some suggestions of, this might be a good fit for this kind of project or this kind of project. And then I will draft, based on their feedback, I will draft the call If we need to discuss with community groups, that'll be part of that process. So right now, even before a call is out there in the public, we're looking at least a month of back and forth. From, I have a project, I want to do an RFQ, to, okay, a month later, we might have an RFQ that's ready to go out. It's, and that would be a quick one. That would be a quick
That's
timeline.
quick.
And then I like to have several months for the RFQ to be out in the world, to reach people, to make sure we can get, get it out in front of eyes that may want to apply. I will send direct to people that I feel like might be a good fit. And then before that commission is awarded, it's usually several months of process. So.
Yeah, excellent. I think I'll just pass this one to Kate.
Oh, it's just me.
Do you have
That's
anything
right.
to add?
That's right. Well, I wrote down that that you really need to be able to align your artwork or your method of working with the call, and that it's important for you to be able to sell your vision to whatever you're applying for. So that means, like, yeah, the first time you apply for something, most likely you're not sending pictures of what you are anticipating of making. So you send pictures of work you've already made, and you have a letter of interest. So you really have to focus on that letter of interest, that you're very clear and understandable, because you are not talking to a creative person when you send that in. You're
Word.
talking to a group of people that are not art orientated. So you have to be aware of that. Just like grant applications, they're not seen by creatives a lot of times. So you have to be very clear and concise. You don't need to take up the whole page. I think you also have to think of the people who read all the information, unless you have some real detailed thing. Like you want to make it short and sweet and to the point. Like, don't use a lot of filler to make it bigger and stuff like that. Just try to keep it simple. And it's not up to you. They choose whether they like your work or not, and they like your idea, but the idea is very important, and it can change people's minds. It's just very difficult to apply for something that you don't have examples of, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Microphone, please. You get to keep that on.
Sorry. One thing I wanted to add as well in terms of applications is, I think, be clear about what you do, but also be clear about how you engage, right? I think a lot of panels are always looking for, is this an artist that is used to community engagement? Or is part of your way of working having panels or workshops with community? Some panels really like that because they can see how the work is really going to be tailored to them. If that is not part of your working style, that's quite okay. But if it is, I think it's something that more and more panels look for. So the main thing I would add. Oh, and we're throwing around these acronyms a lot. So RFQ is request for quotes, and that was the letter of intent portion. RFPs are request for proposals. And that's usually later where you have a much more, detailed, we want this specific thing idea for this specific location.
Excellent. I think one of the takeaways I learned from this question is people sell to people. This is who you're talking to, and then they're going to help translate it into some of those stakeholders. But remember, we may live in the world of AI, but this is who you're talking to. This people sell to people. Let's move on to question 2. Creating art that resonates in public places. How can artists develop work that resonates in public places while staying true to their artistic vision, while hitting the proposal? Okay. Hello. While hitting the proposal objective. So objective is going to be the key in here because they will be specific. These proposals will be in their communities. What are the challenges in balancing personal expression with the needs and expectations of public or commissioning bodies? For you.
So that actually just picks up on the previous comment I made. Some artists in order to get a better sense of, I know how I like to work, what is actually going to fit this project. We'll spend time in that community, or we'll spend time in that location, which I always recommend. So if you have, you're, I don't know, based in Kirkland, but you end up getting a project that's down in SeaTac or Puyallup or somewhere else, go spend some time there if you've never been, because the sensibilities, it all seems like it's, we're right around each other, but different communities have very different ways of defining what their community looks like. So spending time there will help. Engaging, meeting people. If the project is for, I don't know, an elementary school, that's going to be a very different expression than if it is for an SDOT, Department of Transportation project, right? That is for a bus shelter. And I say that even though intuitively it's very clear that they're different, but yet I have definitely seen artists put forward the exact same thing for both of those. And they're different opportunities. So really understanding what is the opportunity, what is the demographic and the population I'm trying to serve, right?
Nice takeaway on that one. Understanding the demographic is where it's going. And do you think that information is usually provided, or something that the artist has to go out and hit the ground running to go find?
No, that's a good question. So I'll say as a PM, I try and provide as much of that as possible, but I'm providing my take and my summary on it, right? So back to the artist really spending some time is how you take this really high 30,000 foot level description down to something that is much more granular that you can actually go and create off of.
Nice. This here was, Sarah's next. This question was for.
I'm like, how to start?
I know, yeah. Personal expression with needs and the expectations.
Yeah, the expectation part is I've found it to be tricky at times because as much as I try, the expectation management from the commissioning body isn't always as clear until they see things in front of them. So I've seen that happen a couple of times where they will think they want something and we will put it into the call for art, and once they start getting things in, that vision will shift or that expectation will shift. Not always large shifts, but subtly enough that it might change slightly what they realized they were looking for. And I've seen that happen a couple of times because to go off of something Kate said is that a lot of the people reviewing these submissions are not necessarily creative, and they can't necessarily envision what they're looking for until they see something to work from for engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean from the proposal stage, when they start seeing the applications come in, then they can gravitate towards one thing or reject another thing that maybe they thought they were asking for?
Exactly. I've seen a group be determined they were thinking they were going to do some sort of shelter situation for in front of a building that was aligned with a bus stop. It wasn't a SDOT bus stop. It was on private property. And the more that they started seeing what artists were coming in with, they shifted towards, well, actually, maybe we want something that's more vertical. So the actual, what they were asking for shifted. And so by the time we were asking artists to create a specific proposal, that had shifted from what we were originally asking people to submit for to begin with. So expectations of the group can change. Also,
So that's a key takeaway, that
mm-hmm.
even though it could be a 5-point bullet point, as we heard at the beginning, you got to stay flexible because they're going to change their mind. So it's a whole other creative process
or
in
not
itself.
necessarily change their mind, but get more specific about what, get more focused on what they are actually really hoping to work with someone on.
Nice.
It's a nimble process. It's a creative process from both sides. Its flexibility is always key. So if you come in with a very strict vision of, I want to build a tower that looks exactly like this, and can't take community input from that point, it may not go forward. But if you can come in with, here's an idea for a tower, and here's what I've heard from the neighborhood, here's what I feel from the neighborhood, and I'm responding in this way, and then get their input from after you've presented something, and then be able to incorporate that, it almost always then moves forward.
Nice. Okay. This next question is one of my favorites.
Do I get?
Oh
sorry
my
about
gosh!
that.
No,
Sorry
I
about
thought
that.
you had already.
No.
Yeah, correct me.
What I wrote down was that it's a difficult balance. It's hard to let your artwork go through committees because committees don't really understand so much about artist egos, etc. So, but when you do a proposal, the client, you need to make the client fall in love with what you're showing them. And that you also have to be very careful because when you go through committee, the work can change to the extent that maybe you don't like it. So you have to be very, very careful never to show something you don't want to make. And you have to like stay focused on it being true to you still.
Excellent. 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 This next question, we're going to dive into agreements. So, panelists, what are 3 to 5 points that are in every single contract or agreement, whatever verbiage y'all are using, has on it when the art goes in a public place? And then there is a second question to that, because we've all been working for so long. And the second question to that, I'm just going to ask it so we can flow that into the conversation, is how have you seen agreements change over the last 10 years? You know, we have internet and budgets, and technology has changed so greatly. So I'm just hoping we can give the attendees at least 3 to 5 points that are in everything, and how maybe some of those changes have happened over the years.
Guess I'll start real quick since I'm holding pass. Scope, timeline, pretty standard. Provisions for that to change, also usually included. So some language around if design changes, the artist is allowed for a change order, and what that process might be.
And a change order can mean like if the fabricator couldn't fabricate everything, or if the price
a pandemic
changed.
happens and there's supply chain issues that affect the original timeline. So that's something that I've seen before, or budget. That's something I've seen that used to be a little more vague in agreements and now are really more obvious and more front and center in agreements. Another thing that on the private side almost always is included, but is even more strict now. It used to change from different corporate entities. You know, it wasn't always, some would require it, some wouldn't. Now they all require it, is commercial liability insurance for the artist to carry that. Even if you are not fabricating or touching the piece, everybody's insurance crazy now. So that is always going to be on an agreement.
I would just add that also ownership and copyright is usually included in our agreements. And then maintenance and conservation. Since you are the artist and you are selecting the materiality of that artwork, you need to help us take care of it for the long term, especially with permanent public artworks. We want to make sure that they're there for a really long time.
And copyrights, the artist is responsible for doing a copyright with the state and the government.
However they want to do that, I'm not sure about that process.
Okay.
But it is theirs to copyright, and it doesn't have anything to do with the commissioning agency.
Okay, so she's telling the artist it's up to them.
Mm-hmm. Do we answer the second part of the question here, or shall we leave that till later?
Wait, I want to know now.
Okay. Public art agreements have become more detailed.
Okay.
As things evolve and we learn new insights, we like to write that down on paper so everybody knows. And as Sarah was talking about, when you're talking about scopes of works and changes, also many projects are connected with construction projects, and sometimes the site even changes. So what we may have thought that we wanted to create in that space may not even exist any longer. So we have to be flexible and willing to change, and that may also be where a change order comes in. Maybe we have to change what we're asking for completely.
And who change orders and stuff? Who's paying for those? Like, can the artist say to you, you get 2 change orders in how this goes? Or, I mean, I'm really trying to put the power to the artist.
For public agencies, that would be in the form of an amendment.
Okay.
And if a public agency is asking you to change something,
Yeah.
then that would be grounds for an amendment.
Okay.
And that's usually something that's negotiated.
So
And that could be
amendments.
timeline as well. If the
Okay.
artist needs more time, then you negotiate an amendment to the contract. Or if the project needs more time, then you negotiate an amendment.
Right.
And then budgets have changed because budgets can always change. They're addressing what we're doing, so those can often change.
I'll add that, so with Artois, for example, there are actually 2 different contracts that you have with the state. So when you first win a commission, you get into what's called a design phase. And that is really just you coming up, visiting the site, coming up with an initial design, presenting that to the committee, coming up with a final design that is actually approved by the committee. That's its own contract because depending on the construction timeline, that can last a really long time. And there can be multiple iterations in that. So that's its own. That's when your design is actually approved is when you move into the actual commission contract. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, is just sometimes it's more than one contract that you would be working with. And then in terms of other things that go in there, so your fabrication, your, who you might be contracting with. So you're receiving a contract from the state or from whichever commissioning body it is. But you might have your own collaborators. You might be designing, but somebody else is fabricating for you. So how are those spelled out? Or sometimes those are left up to you. That is something you want to be very clear on, right? Whoever signs that contract, and it's part of the contract, is part of the enforcing of it. And then sometimes as well when you are, so I'll give an example of maybe you're doing work at a hospital. In that case, the hospital or the construction company might be the ones helping you install. You want to make sure that is part of your contract as well, right? And there are a couple of different advantages to that. So who is managing labor in industries, like that entire piece of very, very long, detailed paperwork. If your site is who is installing for you, that releases you from having to do all of that paperwork. So it's just something to ask sometimes. It's also, they might be the ones hiring cranes. They might be the ones hiring all the large equipment for you to install, especially if it's at height. If they can take on that liability, that's easier for you. It exposes you to their timeline, but it releases you from some of the liability. Okay, so design, fabrication, maintenance, I think folks have already touched on here. If your commissioning body has their own conservation department, they're more than likely the ones handling maintenance. So I think it's just a specification with them as, this is how I would maintain the work. Every 2 years, it needs to be dusted or, washed or whatever that is. But you want to be very clear with how the work should be maintained because 20 years from now, you may no longer be in the state of Washington. And it might be an entirely new set of folks who are part of that organization who need to understand how to manage your work for you. So being explicit about what a maintenance plan is when you may not be there. And then I think the last part I would say is because we have so many projects coming in very early in construction, you may have an opportunity to have your work really integrated into the design of the building. And so architects, while very possessive of the design, right? You may also end up with some who are like, oh, can we help you with landscaping? Can we help you with, lighting to best showcase the work? Can we create a recess in this particular wall that allows your work to really be showcased the way it is? So the earlier you can get into the design process and start to work with them so that they also feel like they want to help you with this work to make it the best it can be, there's an opportunity for integration there that I think we're seeing more and more, and it just makes for a better final result. You know?
This is really good stuff. This is good stuff. I have a third question to this, but I wanted to give Kate an opportunity, and Jennifer too. Jennifer's so much more in the business acumen part, which is a little bit later, but.
So I'll answer the question number 2.
Sure. How have you seen contracts change?
Well, I think I only started working with public art in 2015. So I'm not in the 10-year kind of, I'm almost in the 10-year. But I've seen the application process change. And I mean, dramatically during that time, because I'm more of an academic kind of person. And so at a certain point, like, you didn't have to give your resume anymore. It became like a bio, and it wasn't so much about the things you would put on your resume as it would be about your background and what you were strong in and what kind of work resonated with. A lot of it always has to do with whatever money the NEA is giving to the rest of the country and what they want to support. So it's been sort of an interesting journey. So not so much with the contracts. I mean, I had very simple contracts in the beginning, but and it's hard because you get a contract, it's like 20, 30 pages. So how do you have to read it. You have to read it very carefully. And if you don't understand it, then you have to ask questions about it. And if you don't get that, then you need to go to a lawyer, and you need to make sure that everything's very clear and that you're protected, because you do have to carry the insurance, and the insurance is not cheap to carry. And and like I have, even if I'm not working on a public art project, I have temporary public art that's up, so I have to carry the insurance no matter what. And
can you share your insurance company?
Oh, they've changed. So I think I'm with Hartford right now.
Okay, I've heard of them. Yep.
But I got hooked up with, gosh, I forget the name of the insurance company, but they're local, and I mean, I could look on my phone and find out.
If anybody has questions on insurance, talk to us afterwards, because I also have to carry insurance. Yeah.
And so that's not so much an answer to the contract.
That was
so much.
huge, though. That was definitely a big contribution. But so I just keep hearing, you're talking to people. People are selling to people. People are coordinating with people. So how do you correspond? What does that look like nowadays? We have WhatsApp, we've got text, we've got calls, we've got emails. Like, what is the deal?
Well, usually email's the strongest, I think.
Because it's in writing.
Yes. And also from email, then you can kind of, it depends if you're working between the architects and the institution that's running the whole project, then you need to do a conference call or a Zoom call. Zoom has really made it easy for people to connect, because you actually see the person, you can show an example of what you're working on, especially when you're working with architectural detail. That's very, very, very important. And you can get, you get organized before your call. You have your questions you want to ask, you get them answered, you answer questions that are asked of you, and that's very important, yeah. And then as far as the etiquette and replying, if somebody needs your answer immediately, they'll let you know. Otherwise, like, you can take a business day or two to answer. You probably don't want to take 2 weeks, for goodness sake.
Yeah, that was the other part of the question, is what is the etiquette in replying? Because I know artists get busy in their mind and in their creative process, and they want to finish something before they answer. And then it can be like they're waiting for something to dry so they can see. They're waiting, there is a wait process. So if 72 hours, you better.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I've been like super nervous, especially during COVID, when you propose something, then it comes to reality. You're like, I really got to go sit in the park and talk to a bunch of people. Like, I've been nervous before and communicated that to the people who are managing the project. And I've had team members who are like, don't show your weakness. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I have to say that I'm nervous about this. And don't hit the client with stuff like that. But I mean, they're human beings, they understand.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to add anything to that? Sarah would, sure. Ooh.
I'll just to add to that is that with communication and the 24 hours or
Yeah.
74 hours, 72, is just if for some reason you don't have the answer right away, just reply and say, I'm working on it. Here's the expectation. So expectation is really important, expectation setting. When you're in the middle of a project and you're working with a team, they might be on a deadline where that's why they're asking this for this, information at this point. If there's any way you can meet that, great. Push for that. If you need a little bit more time, just be clear and communicate exactly the amount of time that you do need. Like say they asked you for something on Thursday, they want it by Friday, but you got other things going on that you had project managed yourself into, so you can't get it till Tuesday. Just let them know, and if they need to call to talk that out with you, they will, but just expectation setting is really important.
Yeah, getting those out in the open beforehand, because I know when you're in a creative process, you can't let something go for 2 weeks. I mean, I'm just getting into like a different question, so we'll save that for a minute.
I would also say allow grace. Technology is not perfect. I called an artist because I was waiting for some paperwork that was hinging on moving forward. And he said, I sent it to you on this day. And I'm looking through everything, my junk folder, did I put it in a spot? Did I accidentally delete it? And he said, I'm just going to resend it to you right now while you have you on the phone.
Yeah.
It did not get to me. There was something wrong with his email. So we had to figure out another way. We shared through a shared drive. But technology isn't perfect. If somebody doesn't get right back with you right away, maybe they missed it or it didn't get to them. So resend it, kindly remind them. Yeah.
Awesome.
I will also say if you have a particular need, like an accessibility kind of need, it's okay to voice that and be clear with your project manager or whomever's coordinating the project. So I had an artist for whom technology was not just the bane of his existence. They weren't friends. They had never met. But the longer I ended up working with him on the project for about 1.5 years, and what I realized was it just made him really, really nervous, right? So with him, it was more phone calls. And he would send me things, and his wife was like basically his IT person. And we figured out a way to get the work done, and he installed it, and the school loved it. But it really wasn't just he was a problem, which I was starting to be like, what is happening? It was that it made him unreasonably nervous. Well, we can accommodate that. I just needed to know. So if you do have a particular, whatever it is that requires accommodation, that you should definitely voice that so that it's not perceived as you are just not responding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are helping people, and it's a relationship. So you get to ask them what is the best way to work with them, and you get to tell them what's the best way that they can work with you. Cool. All right, let's go to number 4. This is my favorite question, maybe out of the whole thing. What? I know, it was good. You liked it. Excellent, excellent. I love just that feedback. So is there an ideal medium for art in public places? And I am asking this because I'm looking at a sculpture made out of wood, and I know that wood takes time. And I have a friend, gorgeous, gorgeous wood turner. He's not getting any commissions. He did not get any commissions for a long time. So the rest of that is, are there specific art mediums that you and your committees have shied away from, either for archival purposes, either for cleaning? Tell us about these art mediums and what you shy away from or what you glean to.
So I'll kick this off. I think it's more that there are ideal mediums for ideal locations, right? So if the commission is for an exterior work, then it's going to lend itself maybe not to, acrylic on the painting. I mean, you can figure it out, but it's also about what is the location, what is the budget, and therefore what is the best kind of medium that can suit this location is the best way I've thought about it. Different organizations also have different learned tolerances, right? What they might have been, I'll speak for Artois. When I first came into the organization, I had done a decommissioning project where I'd looked at, over the course of 45 years of the organization, what kind of works had done really well, what had required, been decommissioned faster than we would expect, what had required more maintenance, and that's a learning. Someone said that this field is still evolving. It's a learning. So if you had spoken to them 20 years ago and what they were commissioning for outside, it was large, giant fountains. And that's not what we are doing today, because we've learned how the maintenance of those is problematic, and you end up decommissioning them a lot and so on. So I think it's also depending on what the organization can do. If it's an organization that only does permanent installations, they're going to lean one way. If they're able to do temporary ones in 6 months and they have that tolerance, then it opens them up to different materials that we might not have considered. So it's about the right medium for the right location, in my mind.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add to that for artworks in transit, they love bronze and granite, but that doesn't always make for a great artwork.
Right.
So
aesthetically, it's maybe heavy.
Yeah, and limiting. Yeah.
Yeah, the audience may be quick, and they have attention spans of a hummingbird.
And then also, it depends on what the interaction is going to be.
Good point.
I was in Dublin last fall, and I went to visit Molly Maguire's bronze sculpture, and her bosoms are very shiny because everybody likes to touch them. Is that what the sculptor was expecting? I don't know. But what is the interaction that your artwork is going to muster from the public? How are they going to want to interact with it? So if it is going to be something that they want to put their hands on, is the materiality that you're using going to be okay with all of that interaction? Some sculptures are climbed on, like the artworks at Seattle Center, they're whalebacks. Kids love to climb on those, and they're super shiny because they get all that climbing and interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes to all that.
Yeah.
I feel like in my realm, I've had a little bit more leeway because often I'm working with interiors of privately owned buildings with a very specific demographic that's going to be interacting with those pieces. So I've installed a wider range of artworks than a public convention center might be able to get to install, just because I have a smaller amount of public actually going through. But also when we're looking at something that's going to be, the plaza across from Seattle Center, the committee wants to know, how is this going to weather graffiti? Can I pressure wash it? Is it climbable? Will it break if someone tries to climb it? Will it break if someone tries to kick it? These are questions that committees will ask. Even if they love the piece, they want to know not necessarily whether it's bulletproof, but what's the answer? Mm-hmm. What's the solution if something does happen? Can it be repaired? Can it be cleaned? So that's always part of the conversation. And then just to add to the right material for the right location, exterior has very different rules than interior. You can have a lot more wiggle room to play in an interior space. I've done a lot of great fabric pieces that would not survive outside. So,
mm-hmm. What's the typical bullet point about cleaning? Is it cleaning once a year? Is it just
depends
per
on the material
per piece, and it goes back per material? So, just knowing that that's part of the equation.
It depends on the material, the placement, the building it's in or not in. There's so many different neighborhoods will have different interactions. So, a piece that's less than a mile apart from another piece will have different environment that it's living in, and therefore different things that may or may not happen to it. So there was a lot more considerations for a piece that got installed in Uptown than a piece that's going to get installed in Fremont, just because the way people interact with art in these neighborhoods have, over time, historically been different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. Did anybody have anything to add? I think we'll just go to number 5 now. Did you have anything you want to add? Okay. Oh, yes. Here we go. People talking to people, building relationships with decision makers. And we have touched on this. So if there's more to add, this would be a good opportunity. What strategies can artists employ to build and maintain relationships with the key decision makers, such as you and yourselves, the PMs and the public art coordinators, the real estate developers? How can these relationships be nurtured? Because Jennifer's going to touch on that a little bit later about nurturing your client list. So how can artists continue to nurture? Is that, and there, of course, there's a part two, because I have a part two to everything. But Sarah, you have the microphone. You want to start?
Sure. I felt like I had a two-part answer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've already landed a commission with a client, during the whole process, just communication has always been key. I will recommend forth artists that have been easy to work with, that communicate well, that deliver deliverables on time, that will speak up if they have a question or hit a snag. I really appreciate communication when I'm working with artists, and that's brought artists that I've ended up working with a couple times on several projects, including there's someone here today that I've worked with twice. So good communication will help nurture that relationship and will make the person remember, oh, they were great to work with. I would love to do something with them again. If you haven't yet landed a relationship with a client or a developer, it's a tricky thing to nurture a relationship with the world I work within, because these folks are really, really busy. They're often juggling multiple projects, and they will not even think about art unless it's something that they need to do for the project. And so I don't have a good recommendation of, like, if you want to get to know developers, outreach to them. I would say, dear Lord, do not. It most likely will they'll be like, oh, interesting, and delete the email. But if you're responding to something that's a specific call, or if you maybe happen to have a conversation with somebody and they say, oh, I have a building coming up. Yeah, we probably need to start thinking about the art program. You can maybe have a way in there, but often they do not think about that until they are at that point in the project where they need to. So that's something that's very specific to the world I work with.
Mm-hmm. We're going to stay on this question for a little bit. It's a big one.
I would just add that network when you can. If there are events like this, show up, meet people, talk to them. And then share your updates. Use social media to talk about your artwork or your newsletters or whatever. Use hashtags so that when I'm looking for that light artist that I want to hire for City Hall, I can put in hashtag light artist Seattle and come up with a list of them. I don't even know if that's a hashtag. That might not be one. Yeah,
I'm
it is
pretty
now.
sure Olivia Steele uses it, so yes.
I think the piece that I would add to this is sometimes people build relationships with your work before they build a relationship with you, right? So in Instagram, social media, but also joining public artist rosters. So I'll speak for ArtsWell, but I'll also speak for Seattle's OAC. The roster is one of the primary ways we showcase your work, right? So people will get to see your work in venues you would never have expected, but because you are on the roster, you're going to be repeatedly shown. And then PMs who have to show these rosters all the time end up being like, well, I really like this person, so I'm really going to be trying to put them out there because I know they're a great muralist, or I know that they're a great glass artist, or whatever it is. So,
And you possibly have worked with them before, so you know that they're user-friendly to work with.
Yeah, so join newsletters, join those places where you can see those opportunities, and then join those rosters. They're passive ways to get your work shown.
About rosters. And also small cities like Shoreline does not have their own roster. So we look at City of Seattle's roster. We look at ArtsWell's roster. We look at Four Cultures rosters. So make sure your information is up to date if you want people to see it.
So I was going to wait till the end to introduce that, but can we introduce, so Washington ArtsWell roster is on their website.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if everybody knows that. You can go to artswa.gov, right, and get on their roster. Key move.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So kind of like we have the, a specific project would have a call. Organizations will have a call for artists, and it's to join these rosters. So ArtsWA's is moving to every 2 years, just about, but there are, at the last time I looked at it, 600 plus artists on the roster. So imagine that helps us when we go to a committee and they say, oh, we're looking for this kind of opportunity with this kind of artist who has this kind of thing. I can go to that artist, that group of 600, cull it down to something that's a little bit more specific so that they are looking at artists that might be a better fit for them. Seattle's roster is just about the same size for a smaller, in theory, smaller location or municipality. But I was on the panel for that earlier this year, and it's a varied list of different kinds of artists, different kinds of mediums, different kinds of experience. I would also mention that if you are a studio artist looking to get into public art, a roster is a great way, right? It's a really good way to get your work seen, where maybe a bigger call, that's a $200,000 project, you might be like, I don't know, but there are all these other opportunities show up that we show the rosters to.
Thank you.
I have one more comment about that.
I love it.
Sometimes when we're looking at rosters, we may have an art opportunity and we see an artist and we think that opportunity would be perfect for their style of art, and we will send you, if we can get a hold of your information, so make sure it's current, we'll send you the call to artists and say, hey, I think this would be a great opportunity. You should put your name in. Because working in public agencies, we can't look at your artwork unless you submit to the call.
Okay. And there's no way for them to get on City of Shoreline's roster at the moment?
We don't have a roster. I am the art department.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't have an assistant.
Yes. Okay. Nate? Maybe
Nate
just
does help a lot, but
just something.
Yeah, you got me. It's not nothing.
he does.
The chamber could make a roster.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Just a quick question. So once you're on the roster, are you on it forever, or you have to apply every year?
No, that's a good question. So ArtsWA's roster was every 4 years. So once you're on the roster, you're on it for 4 years, right? That doesn't necessarily mean you get a commission, but it does mean you'll be seen by others, and you'll be seen by others, not just our committees, but others.
And you get an opportunity to update your information.
You do, exactly. And I think Seattle's roster is, I believe, every other year, but I have to confirm that.
As soon as she gets her second day on the job,
That's
she
right.
will let you know.
Start on Wednesday. Yes, I'll let you know.
So, yeah.
About the roster.
Yes.
So there's so many artists on the roster. How do you stick out and get noticed from all the other artists on the roster?
No, that's a good question. I'll go back to kind of how it was answered at the beginning, right? Just as a call has here are things we're looking for, your letter of intent, your pictures, your so on. We're very specific about it for a specific call. We're specific about it for rosters too. So make sure that you meet what the call is asking for. That's one. But two, be also very clear about these, this is maybe what my expertise is. This is what my process is. This is how I engage communities, and this is what I'm interested in.
And what I heard out of all of that is how your artwork engages a community.
Absolutely.
It has to be a participatory sentence in there.
Yeah.
Even if you say you work on climate-focused issues and stuff. Well, then the next, how does the artwork participate?
Yeah, because again, most of our committees are not artists. And they just want to know, can we work with this artist in a way that they can bring something that we can resonate with, right? So you want to show them that you can do that and you have experience doing that, and so they can look forward, like they want to work with you. Sometimes when it comes down to the final two artists that you're trying to deliberate, the artist that shows very clearly how they engage a community and have brought a community's vision to life while remaining true to their style, that's who they'll go with.
Yeah. So for the folks on Zoom, the question was, how does the artist stand out on the roster besides, so thank you for clarifying some of that.
Yeah, thank you. In my response, I'm going to reiterate what you've heard, probably just in different terms.
Yeah.
So this is best practices in relationships, right? So number one, you're getting to know the other person. And in this instance, your true customer is the person is the decision maker who's paying you. In your mind, it might be the people enjoying your art, but it is actually the decision maker. And there's an acronym called WIFM, what's in it for me? That's your business acronym. But it's not about what's in it for you. It's what's in it for the other person. What is it about what you have to offer that's going to help their needs? So in just other terms, you want to get to know what their needs are, which everyone has said. And they're often dealing with public dollars, and they have to answer specific objectives to account for those dollars. And so if you're looking at the objectives, again, describe how you can meet those objectives by making it very easy. That's how to get to know them. Ask them more questions, really get to know them. And then when you're building a relationship with someone, it's about them getting to know you. So it's, again, what was said, your artist statement. If you haven't done your artist statement, or if you have one, it's a good idea to revisit it and let them know why they can trust you. Again, it's about building trust, because when it comes down to it, it's about how responsive has this person been, how clear, how professional. They want someone that they can count on, because it's their job, it's their accountability, it's the dollars they're responsible for, that they have to, their reputation. So you really want to explain that. And it's okay to share everything great that you've done, because that's about building trust. It's about sharing, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is why you can trust me. In practical terms, that is sharing maybe other related work that you've done. So that's giving them an example of how they can trust you. Oh, they've done this before. Okay, that mitigates risk for them. I know that they'll get the process. It's similar in banking. When someone's making a loan decision, they're assessing the same type of thing. So who you are, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is what I've done to show in your area that you can trust me. And then you let them know, I hear you, I see you, I know you. You can state, I understand your objective is this is how I believe I can meet this. Here's my values, vision, this is the mediums I like to work in. And that is one way just to build your relationship within the context of our conversation. A comment about contracts, all I can say in that is, again, it's about building expectations. So the only thing I've seen come up as a challenge is when the business owner, the entrepreneur, the artist is dependent on someone else responding to them, giving them feedback before they can move on with their project, and they're on a deadline, but the decision maker, the person, is not responsive. So you could consider either setting that expectation up in an email or a conversation, and or in your contract. If I don't hear back within 2 weeks of giving you my first reiteration or my first design, this is what may happen, or we'll need to push the deadline out or whatever. So relationships are all about expectations, trust, them getting to know you and you getting to know them, and sharing, here's a win-win, here's how I can be success for you, and this is a great opportunity for me, and this is why. So those are just best practices in building relationships. And I will talk a little bit later on about kind of creating a system where you identify who that decision maker might be in terms of is this what segment of the market are they is a business term, and then how often do I follow up? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those are my comments for the relationship piece.
Thank you. And to build on that again before we move to the next questions, is drilling down how to keep these relationships going even after a piece has been completed. So would you say, so I'm a big fan of every artist either having an Instagram tool to promote themselves, but also it's another way to build relationships is to have your own email list. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. So my question is, take the work and make it how it answers all of their questions. So if you want to build relationships so you can get a second piece, can these artists go ahead and put you on their email list as, from their PM? And is that something that you read? Is it something you read now, or would you read in the future?
Just to throw this in there, that when I've worked with people in the public art realm, they change their positions so quickly too. But it's great to keep in contact with them, but sometimes they don't keep that position for super long.
I just have a quick note. In business terms, you can ask that particular prospect, customer, would you be interested in keeping in touch with this type of work or this type of medium, or following me, and ask them how best to keep in touch with you, and it can be.
That's a huge question. That question has helped me sell millions of artwork every single year. That question right there. Sure. How best
can I keep in touch with you? Would you like to keep in touch with my art or this particular aspect of my work, and how best to keep in touch with you? And then that
is building a relationship. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I do want to keep in touch with you. Okay, great. Can I put you on my email list? Can I get your number? What is the best for you? Instagram? Are you Instagram only? I just think emails are not dead in my world. I think emails are even more, the more intimate way to continue your client building relationships.
To add on to all this, another way so artists that I've worked with so many over the last 12 years. One thing I really, truly love, whether I've been asked to be kept in touch with or not, is if someone I've worked with in the past did a new project, reach out and let me know. Oh, just want to make sure, did you see that I did this cool thing for the city of Shoreline? Let me know. I don't always pay attention to what's going on outside of my little sphere of work that I'm doing right now. So, someone reaching out and just saying, hey, I want to just loop you in. I just did another great thing. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure you saw this. Thanks for our initial contact. Do you have anything new coming up where this might be a good fit? I'm doing this now.
Yeah, ask him. Advocate for yourself.
And it can just be a real quick thing. It doesn't have to be in depth. I can give a quick reply of, nice to hear from you. Really cool to see that. Yeah, I have something new coming up, or no, I don't. But great to hear from you. It's never been a bad thing.
It's never been a bad thing, or you're annoying them. I hear a lot of artists are like, I don't want to annoy them.
I say this to all my clients. Your art or your business is its own living, breathing thing, and so you are its advocate. So it is really not about you or rejection about you. It's really speaking up and advocating, because your art needs to get out in the world. Someone needs to hear it. So it is your your honor and privilege to just reach out and say exactly what you said. That is an excellent question, and always keep that perspective. It's not personal. If they if they say no or they don't want it yet, it's not the right time or it's not the right fit. But keep advocating for your art.
It's one less person that you have. If they say no, it's just one less person that you have to pay for in your newsletter thing. Because a lot of newsletters like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign have 1,000-person limit. So if they say no, super. They're helping you. Really, just don't feel like you're rejected. For sure. All right, if anybody would like to add anything, this would be good now, but I've looked at the time. It's 2:45. I'd love to take a little intermission, have some beverages, have some snacks, and then come back in and dive in. I think for the panelists, and we've only hit number 6, and we have 20 questions, so I might reevaluate a few. We can go faster. We can, because I think they're all so good to touch on, and then maybe we can have a part 2 later on in the next year or something. So, all right, everybody, let's do it. Let's have a quick intermission. Let's think about the 10 to 15 minute type thing so we can come back. Hi, everyone. It's just about 3 o'clock, so we're going to jam through and look at these last questions. And I also have written down on the tables, there's other networking questions. So if there's any of them that you wanted us to try to help you with any of these, let's talk about these questions too, hopefully. And especially because I was thinking to go until about 3:30 so then we can network again, people to people, or we can continue with the questions. I feel like it's kind of what is going to be best for all of you. So are there any votes? Should we keep jamming the questions or should we network? A little bit of both. Let's see how far we get in 30 minutes. Okay. I think Kate is getting some steps in. I'm going to go find her.
And I also just want to let everyone know that this is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel, City of Shoreline, and on the City of Shoreline's channel, which you can find on your, what are they, Roku and Fire Sticks, and I think just, how do I find it, Nate? I don't know. Look up City of Shoreline and see if you can get it that way. Yeah.
Do you want us to hold questions for after, or do you want us to just interject questions?
I think holding till the end when it's more of networking would probably be, especially when we're not really sure about time, because we like to talk. That's not a bad thing.
It's not. That's how people get answers.
Yes.
One thing I think is also really important with our next question is just helping artists identify things and pitfalls specifically of what they can avoid. So what are the most common mistakes that you've seen on the artists replying on the RFQs or RFPs? And we did kind of get into it because the question two was what are the most common mistakes during the process? Like, have you seen artists just not budget accurately? Or have you seen a lot of the time management just be really poor? So this is a question for all of us here to give some examples of some common pitfalls that we've seen and mistakes. I like our order that we've been going in, so.
Can everybody hear me this on?
Yeah.
All right, great. So during the application, I think the two most common ones I see are artists not really adhering to what the call is, right? So not really answering the questions, or just kind of you can tell that it's kind of a rote stack, which we all, I have a pat, bio and statement and letter of intent, but you should try and tailor them, some aspect of it to the call. So that's one. The second is your picture quality. So when we ask for samples of your work, and knowing that most of the time you get to upload it, and then that's what we send to committees. So it's, before they meet you, it's the best way for them to understand, what you do. So taking pictures that are very clear of the work, very clear of how the work is situated in a space, right? So they get a sense of scale. I know a lot of artists, let's say a call is asking for 6 examples of your work and you have 23 that you are really passionate about. So they'll create like composite images. Don't do it. Don't do that. They just end up being very small, very difficult to look at. And when you are a panel reviewing 100 applications, they will fly right past those, right? So it's a way of like removing yourself from the process even before they've gotten a chance to talk to you. So that's during the application. During the process, time management is a bit of it. We will have, the PMs and the administrators are helping you with that. So I don't see that as much of an issue. I see it, though, where artists might sometimes be very hesitant to receive feedback. It's your work. It's personal, it's reflections of self, so I understand. But sometimes an artist can get so stuck in, this is what I want to do. And so I've definitely also seen it where a committee has tried to give feedback or a PM has tried to give feedback, the artist doesn't budge, and then they lose the commission. It is rare, but it does happen. So I think it's also just keeping in mind, the feedback is so that at the end of the day, it is a win-win. It is something that they love and you are proud to have in the world, and just being open to that.
I would also say questions about the call. I've had artists expect a 1-hour conversation about the call to artists, and if every artist who submitted to a call, I had to give them an hour, I would not have time to do any of the rest of my work. So look at the call, really study it. We try to be very specific about those, what we're asking. And if your questions aren't answered in that, formulate them well and email them to the administrator who's doing the call. And that way, you'll figure out how to tailor your submission for that specific call to arts. Poorly organized portfolios is one that I had, and I think you touched on that. That's really important. When we're talking about naming conventions, I'm just going to say that again. It's a really easy mistake, but it's also really easy to fix on your end.
And what can you draw out more of that?
Meaning disorganized?
Yeah, like the order in which a portfolio, what kind of flow do you appreciate, or what should they be looking at?
Maybe it isn't necessarily about the flow, but if you're telling me a story through your letter, you're telling this panel that's going to read this letter why you are the best artist to select for this particular opportunity. So in that story, what is the picture book that they're going to be looking at when thinking about this story? So what parts of your portfolio best represent that? And then always check your work. A lot of people apply to a lot of calls and maybe don't go back and just make sure that all of their images are attached. And if we ask for 10 images and you included 5 images, but thought that you put 10 in there, but they didn't, like we talked about, technology is not perfect, and maybe they didn't upload like you were hoping that they did. Or maybe when they uploaded, it renamed them or something. Just go back and check your work. Make sure that all your documents are there, your letter of interest, all the things that it's asking for on the call.
Storytelling, people talking to people.
I know we're short on time, so I'm going to be succinct with just 2 things I would add. One is I've seen calls be too wordy, and the panel will glaze over. So if you can get to the meat of what you are proposing in your first 2 sentences, please do.
Challenge is on.
Yeah. A panel doesn't necessarily need to know your whole history of the art you've done before. Start with the meat and then elaborate on it. Like, you want to grip them right away. You want to draw them in right away because they are reading 60 of these. So that's definitely a big thing I would recommend. Another is visuals. If you're at the part where you're pitching a proposal as opposed to just qualifications from past work, and you have an opportunity to do a sketch, or if you can overlay that sketch into, if they've given you a rendering of the space that this is going to go into, if you can use tools that are available, through Google or through your phone to cut your sketch out and just pop it in there on an extra visual, that helps these committees a lot because they can't always envision what your piece will look like in the space that they're trying to put it. So that's something that I've seen some artists do that will make their proposal stand out when a committee's looking at a lot. So having a clear visual, great images, and then also taking that little extra step to take your sketch or your concept and pop it into place will really just help the committee. So if you have that opportunity, that's great.
Do you mean when it's in the proposal stage as opposed to just the regular application stage?
There's a question for the Zoomers. Could you say that again?
So Kate asked when it's in the proposal stage as opposed to just the regular application. So in my process, I have usually a RFQ, and then we ask for proposals. So yeah, this would be during the proposal stage.
I love it. This makes me so happy because when I talked to each of the panelists, they each said, wow, I can't wait to learn from the other panelists. So I think that invites so much more engagement.
Wait, do you have more?
No, nothing more.
Something.
Okay.
And that something is that when you were speaking about the photos, when you're doing public art, it's very different than doing studio art. And this is something it took me a while to learn, and I have to pay photographers now to go back to the spaces my public art is in, because it's not an object. It exists in space. It exists in architectural space. And that kind of reference is very important. So, you know, I have some really great work, but I shot it wrong, you know, so you have to go back and shoot it again with that in mind.
Shooting it wrong, like, let's draw that out a little bit.
Like shooting it like, here's
daylight?
the object isolated,
I
instead of
see.
here's the object in space where it's placed.
And maybe even like a human there. So
Yeah, some scale perspective as well.
And the lighting, I'm sure, is something to be mindful of. Daytime can blow out, too much daylight can blow out glass, hand-blown glass or cast glass. Sarah, you noticing case in point?
The cloud piece.
There's a cloud piece here in City Hall
Here
of
in
Shoreline.
City Hall of Shoreline is a cloud piece, and right now the light is directly behind it. If I were to take that picture, it's not going to show up well on a panel. You're going to see the Trader Joe's sign across the street. So yeah, that's a key element as well. Thank you, Kate.
Different lighting situations.
Yeah, so for the artist to know that, so if you are going to hire the photography job out, make sure that you've had a conversation with them, that they know about scale and about the light. That's just knowing that ahead of time will save you so much struggle and it will save you money.
Jody, just one quick thing to add. Pay attention to deadlines. I think we all have the panic email at like the call closes at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, and at 2, my inbox gets flooded and my phone gets flooded, right?
Right.
Most of us now, a lot of systems, we all use submittable, so it's no longer me manually going in to close it. It is this system will shut at this time, right? And different PMs do it differently and give grace, but if you are assuming grace, you are presuming, right? So just, I would say strongly, for your sake and ours, just go ahead and submit it on time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just quickly add on to that point that is usually, that deadline's there for a reason, because we have scheduled time with a volunteer committee or a panel, and we are trying to make sure we have enough time to prepare to present artists in the best possible light. And if things come in late, we cannot prepare it well.
Mm-hmm. Let's jam down to the question about securing funding and resources. And this is a difference, but I'll let the panelists differentiate. What funding opportunities and resources are available for artists working on public art projects, art in public places projects? And how could artists successfully navigate grant applications, crowdfunding, and or other financial avenues to support their work? And I'd love for Jennifer to start.
I can speak to a little bit to crowdfunding and to bank financing. But the first question you might want to determine is how much money do you need and what do you need it for? And as an artist, often you're investing in your materials and your time and your space, which is all cash up front, and then there's a gap between what you pay and then when you get paid. And so knowing kind of what that gap might be, it would be the number one question as far as bank financing. That's what they're going to want to know. And then they're going to want to know how will you pay it back. And so doing like we can help with a cash flow forecast or explaining that is helpful. But there's a ton of SBAs, microloans. There are Department of Commerce puts out loan and grant opportunities. So grab my card if you want afterwards, and I can hook you up with different resources. The best practice for crowdfunding is, as you know, search at all the platforms of crowdfunding, simple Google search, look for projects similar to yours out there so you know that that's the right platform for you. Look for different calls for funding that are similar to yours, because that's going to be your tribe on that platform. Then you want to determine what the ask is going to be and what the person is going to get in return for their pledge. And then you just have to, once you determine that, is that cost effective? Is that scalable, depending on how many people are going to hit you up for that? And then it's just a matter of getting the word out, which is a whole other marketing piece. And so just a tip for that on the marketing, someone needs to hear from you a minimum of 7 times in 7 different ways before they might get it in their head. So it's no shame to just reach out through different mediums, different ways, and numerous times, because you just might catch them at a good time where they actually get your message. So I'm happy to talk I could talk all day about bank financing, but I won't go there. Unless someone has a specific question about it.
That might be best for after, but on your point is there have been studies, and that's what they're teaching in schools these days, that in business schools, that people need to like, know, and trust you. And one of the ways to do that the study found is that you have to have a 7-point system before the people really understand where you're coming from and who you are, to like, know, and trust you. That's why so many entrepreneurs outside of the art trade have developed those automatic funnels that you keep hearing about. If you're, how do you reach out to people through your newsletters, and then you can put your offering out there, and then if someone clicks on that email, then it will send you through a series of funnels, and it's developed from this 7-point system. So just going back to, if you have a newsletter that you're sending out to clients, potential clients, to keep updated on what you're doing, it's not a bother. You're doing yourself a service by doing that.
You're keeping in communication with them, and that's what relationships are about. You're letting them get to know you numerous times in numerous ways, so they can see all sides of you and build trust with you and build trust with your brand. I wanted to add that a best practice in successfully navigating this is about something that Sarah mentioned, is get to the meat of it. So let them know what you're selling, let them know what you're offering, like right up front, and then, who you are, this is what I'm offering. Oftentimes I'll read something and I don't really know what they're selling. I'll read a business plan. It takes me a while to figure out what's actually going on here and how, so just get to the meat of it. That helps anyone assessing, like an investor or anyone. This is who I am, this is what I'm offering, this is how it works, this is what you're gonna get for it, and this is why you should work with me. And that's sort of a successful system for navigating a lot of this stuff.
Awesome. Sarah, did you have something to add, or because Melinda do you have something to add with this one? Okay.
Funding.
All right. Leveraging collaborations and partnerships. How can artists build and leverage collaborations with other creatives and organizations or businesses to expand their reach and impact? What are the benefits and potential challenges of these partnerships? I feel like we are starting to get repeated a little bit because the first answers at the beginning were so thorough. So I'm happy to move on to the next, or if you feel like you have something to add to this one.
If you feel like your artwork isn't getting shown, but you have a friend whose artwork is really getting shown, look for ways to collaborate. Maybe there's another way to get your artwork shown. Maybe there's another way to collaborate and learn more about your artwork, learn more about your fellow artists' artwork.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll actually build on that too, and this is part of the conversation we're having at the table earlier. If you are, for example, a painter, and maybe there's an opportunity that's come up that is maybe glass, right? Mm-hmm. Then that is also an opportunity where you can expand. One, you get to expand your, what you can do, and therefore the finished projects you have. But collaborating with a glass artist to come up with something that neither of you would have, by yourselves been able to do. But now you have something stronger. You both have something that you can share in the future for what you can do. I've seen that work really successfully for artists.
What I've also seen for artists is like an Instagram challenge where 3 to 5 artists get together and they share their audience on social media, and they do a silly challenge, like maybe one who may be an illustrator says, okay, everybody, let's do illustrations for 5 days, but you have to go and tag all my friends. You have to sign up for their Instagram, follow them on Instagram. And then everybody does something like that. It's gamify might be another word if anybody's interested in that word. But it allows the collaboration between how they work together, how they have fun together, their lifestyle, and then somebody can give something away or add something to if somebody purchases something from their Instagram. You can do something to add on. So I've seen 5 women get together. They each do a drawing challenge to their followers, and then they do a raffle at the end of the 5-day challenge where somebody gets an original of the artwork. And I've seen audiences grow tremendously just from there. Let's talk about this one. Let's talk about crafting a compelling artistic narrative, because what we've heard already, I think, can be drilled down, get down to the meat of it right away. But are there points what are the ways artists craft and present a compelling narrative that resonates with the commissioners and the decision makers and the PMs? So we've heard shorter is better. We've heard the meat of it in the first 2 sentences, but are there anything else? Can we drill this down any more for the artist with us today? How can your artwork be engaging with the community? How it interacts with the community is the third one.
I just want to clarify, because we're not doing the case study, or we are still doing the case study?
We still do the case studies.
Okay.
Did I pass them?
No, that's okay.
Good.
All right. I'm sorry, so how can the artist, or how can the community engage more, or how can the artist engage
How can the artist craft and present real specific, compelling narratives that resonates with the decision makers?
I think this goes back to what I was saying before about you have to kind of know your community. So that asking lots of questions of your stakeholders who are, the audience for the work, representatives of the audience for the work. I think of when we put panels together for a particular commission. I'll speak for, let's say it's a K through 12 school, right? I'm trying to have maybe students on there. I'm trying to have parents on there. I'm trying to have staff, decision makers, capital projects. There's a whole different host of different folks on the committee who all represent different aspects of that committee. So understanding a little bit more of who's going to be looking at the work, who's going to be interacting with it a lot, and then how can your particular style or approach best sit in that space. What I've seen with that is, or my favorite versions of that are where an artist almost goes in a different direction than what their past work is, right? Your style is your style, generally speaking. But now you get to create something that you could not have envisioned because you've taken the time to listen in a completely different environment than you would normally work in. To me, those are the most successful. When that care and that process is taken into account really well.
Okay.
I actually don't, I would say the same thing, so I'm just going to ditto what Adi said.
I've got blank on my notes for this too, because I think every call is so different and so specific, and it's very difficult to see what will connect with the community. It really depends on the place and the community that it is. I mean, sometimes you're not asked to respond to the community, just to the place, but grounding yourself in the history of that place, or like trying to find parallels between your work or your interests and what happens in that space, and then just to follow your curiosity, regardless whether that's asking to hold public events to talk to the public in that area, or if it's just going down to the park and asking people questions. I mean, there's a lot of ways to engage with the community, although maybe if you're just applying for something, you don't have the time to do that, but you can always put it in your proposal that you would like to engage with the community.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to put your finger on how to make something resonate completely and deeply with everyone involved.
Yeah, it's almost like you can have a template of questions that you know your artwork addresses, and then for each call you can go in and make sure you're weaving that into the call. So Kate, for example, she works in glass and she has a relationship with ocean, but if that call, if she can use those two things, but then her artwork also deals with form and light and color and refraction. So she can just have some things on the side that she knows her artwork addresses and then be able to input that into the call. You know what I mean? Because nobody can have 50 calls ready to go, like a templated, but that idea of a template can be used in a different way.
I have heard of artists having ideas and like working up something on it and then keeping a file so that they know if there's a call that has any similarities to that, they can just pull it from the file and use it for that.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to remember, I think, because we're in 2024 and something you may have forgotten was so clever years ago, or witty, or eloquent. It's not lost. You can always put it in a file.
Jody, just something really quickly that came up from your comments was also, I think more and more artists are also thinking not just of the community as it is now that the artwork is going to reside in, but also the history of the space, right? So we think of land history, for example, and who was here before. We think of language. We think of kind of just what are the historical events that have shaped this area, even if that is not the current understanding of how this area is being used. And those end up actually being really thought-provoking, because sometimes the committee has not thought of some of these. Sometimes they have, but sometimes they haven't. And you can see them also starting to embrace, like, oh, you're giving us more to think about, and therefore being more inclusive by bringing in this historical perspectives.
And there's some art calls that are strictly about celebrating the history of the space as well, or the location.
And I would also say, while you're doing your research about a call and the space, sometimes things are aspirational. So who does the city see themselves being? And can you respond in that way?
Love that addition. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we've got some really meaty things. So if anybody has to tidy out of here at 4, good luck. We have a question here, and then we're gonna be able to look at hear from them, and then y'all can ask specific questions on some of these, particularly number 14. But with question 13, from vision to reality, real estate art management. So Sarah, can you share a detailed study of a successful art installation in a corporate real estate setting? And can you walk us through the process from initial concept discussions with the developers to the final installation? And what were the key challenges? How did y'all overcome them together? And is that what you would like, the Miguel video?
Yeah, let's share one. That's just a fun video to see how many. Even before we got to this point, it's a tiny little clip of a large sculpture being installed with a crane, and just how many people had to touch that from the ground to get it into place. It's fun to see. But that was for a project. I mentioned it before that it was there's a project across from Seattle Center in Uptown neighborhood, and they had a through block connector. So it was a place where pedestrians can pass from one side of the block to the other without having to walk all the way around the block. And so they wanted to feature a artwork that would catch and draw the eye, so you knew that you could come down that way, because it wasn't apparent necessarily, because it was constricted with buildings on both sides. They wanted the public to have some sort of signal that you are invited to come in. You can walk through here. So that was where the committee started. The stakeholders it was the architect, the landscape architect, the developer, the building owner, and this was a little bit different because it wasn't actually a full call. It was the developer actually asked for recommendations. So this is where I got to work with an artist that I had already established a relationship with from a past project, and I feel like I have way too many case studies that I wanted to pull from that
Yeah,
I'm thinking
we
of
did
all three
pull
at
up-
once.
We did pull up Miguel's video, and
Mhm.
it is interactive. So when you're ready, we can play the video.
Yeah, it's like 5 seconds. It's short.
Okay, it's short. Nate, can you press play on that slide? Here we go.
So this is the building under construction, and we coordinated well in advance to be able to bring this piece in while we still had a crane on site. Because it took a crane to get this into this tiny little spot where we couldn't necessarily, because sometimes you can have a boom lift from the street to bring a heavy piece in. Sometimes you can use a forklift, but the way this building was designed, this particular location has a garage underneath, so we couldn't bring heavy equipment to this spot. So we had to plan well in advance to be able to bring this piece in using the crane that was building the building, which is not common in the art world.
That sounds like an insurance.
And the insurance was carried by the developer, but the insurance for designing the piece was under the artist. So he had to carry commercial liability. He also worked with, he did his own transport. So sometimes there's insurance just for transporting the piece to ensure that it's protected from point A to point B. But once it was attached to this crane, it was under the contractor. So if anything happened to it, the contractor would have been liable because it was being suspended by their crane and their crane operator.
Was that an amendment that you had to do to switch the insurance for that?
Yes.
So
this was all stuff that had to be worked out over the course of about 2 years to get to this point. So that gives a sense of timeline too, for a large-scale outdoor piece like this. That from the outset, it doesn't look that complicated, but it was incredibly complicated. So that was one of my many case studies.
Yeah, I like how you started out. The artwork came out of a function necessity.
And I'm not sure if this addresses all of the points in that question.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Okay. Creating impactful public places, art that resonates with the community. So we're going to present a case study here from a public art and a state university and go through that process.
Okay. So this is the case study. I've caught up with you now. So the one I'm actually going to give might not be quite it's an educational setting, but not a university. So had to do a project with the Washington School for the Blind. For the deaf. We did one for the blind. It was a different PM, but I did one for the Washington School for the Deaf, and worked with a co-PM on it. And I think what was interesting, so application-wise, I mentioned we have a roster, and when we spoke with the committee about would you like to use the folks from the roster, they were very clear that they really wanted an artist who had a lived experience with deafness, either for themselves or in their family, which meant it became a public call. And we had quite a number of folks respond. We went through that process, and they ended up with 3 finalists, and they still couldn't quite decide. So we ended up doing a virtual call, kind of like a virtual interview, where they heard from the 3 artists. They were artist teams, actually. And from that, they narrowed down to 2 and still couldn't decide. And so we ended up inviting both of the finalists to come to the school for a walkthrough and kind of like understand this place and then come up with a proposal. So I think, one, this echoes the point we had earlier about be flexible, because our normal process is pick your artist and then bring them to site. And these were still folks that they were interviewing. What became clear from that site visit was there was one artist who wasn't fully deaf, but had a hearing impairment, but just had a high, I want to come here, I want to visit, I want to work with the students, I want to leave a book, I want to leave a legacy, we can do this thing and that thing. And then there was another artist who was also engaged, but wanted to work not within the spaces the students would be, but on the facade of the building. 2 perfectly great approaches. But what resonated with the committee was the one who wanted to come in and work with their students and think of posterity for the students, right? Not just on the building, but where they would be. So that was one thing that came to mind. Sidebar, this is not a population that I normally work with. So I say all the time that this my first visit to the school was, this is the quietest school. It's a K through 12. It's the quietest school I've ever been to. And then I realized it's quiet to me, right? Because then there was all this signing and they were having full-on conversations. I just couldn't hear them. So it was a very different way of thinking about, right, we really need to understand who this population is. The artists they ended up with, the Orlowski Studio, who are fantastic, did 3 community engagements where they came, they were based in Vancouver, they came down and would spend full days with the students, listening to them, capturing signage, and capturing video of how they were signing before they even presented an initial concept to the committee. So what our normal process would be 1.5 years to maybe 2.5 years for a K through 12 project. This is a 4-year project because of the number of, how long it took them to select an artist, how long it took them to come up with a design. And then there was also, they ended up coming up with this, y'all, I'm so geeked out about this. It's a shame that I can't, no, it was really cool. So they did long exposure photography of the students signing key phrases that they had come up with. And then they are turning those phrases into glass sculptures. So it's almost like signing in 3D.
Neat.
And this is what's going to sit. And that's where I was just looking at, like, whether that they're basically going to do these sculptures hanging in the new atrium of the building for the school. So even from that, the committee at first was like, they're doing what? What do you mean? Explain. Like, it was really hard for the superintendent, especially of this committee, to understand what was being done. To, okay, now we get it, right? Mm-hmm. But it took them a long time. Ultimately, though, the kind of similar to your project, the construction, basically the design team is taking custody of installing the work for them, and that's who it's going to hang in an atrium. So it's supposed to be installed in January, which I will miss. But I think hopefully that gives you all a sense of, like, even when I think of K through 12 schools and what opportunities, this was not on my list of what was possible at all, right? So it's a surprise all the time.
There is surprises. Artwork doesn't necessarily just have to be in the white cube at the gallery or in the entryway. Yeah, it's really great. It can be in all communities, everywhere. Super. Did anybody have anything to add? We were just going to go to Melinda's case study here. She's going to share a public art project integrated into the transit system.
I'm going to talk about one of my favorite public art projects that I was the PM on, the project manager on. It's called Lock on Tacoma. It's in Tacoma, underneath a Sounder commuter rail trestle.
Ooh.
Which sounds a little abysmal, and it was before we put art there. It features panels where you can put your lock on there. So this is something that we've seen in Paris, I think is really the most famous one, but people have been doing it all over the place. In this specific area, the artist, Diane Hansen, incorporated spaces where you could put your lock on there. So we have people personalize their locks.
Lock out, okay.
And it helps foster a sense of ownership and involvement. It's also a cultural reflection. This is a cultural practice that's kind of happening all over the world right now. And it's a way for people to really connect with each other, or with, they go and look at these locks and read them, and it's a way to connect with people they might not even know. By allowing people to interact with the artwork, the installation turned this ordinary and kind of abysmal concrete space, because it's an underpass that was turned from what was a one-way street to a pedestrian underpass, and it was all concrete. But it turned it into a space that people could engage and kind of celebrate things there. The artwork has a 253 on it, which is Tacoma's area code. So, and they're little locks that have the numbers incorporated into the base of them. There are giant hearts on the artwork, and she collaborated with a local art blowing studio that teaches kids to create some of those pieces. So we have community interaction all around on this piece, and it's still there. I just drove by it last night when I was in Tacoma.
Yeah, where is it?
A Street between 25th and 26th, underneath the trestle.
Okay.
There's a Sound Transit video about this piece. So if you look up on YouTube, Sound Transit, Lock on Tacoma, it's a lovely video that talks about the magic that can happen when you put locks underneath the trestle.
Okay.
We've had people get engaged there, profess their love, or, just put things of wishes that they want so they can have their wishes come true.
I was going to say love wins, but art wins. Oh, that's very special.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to share your case study? We're going to talk about her art in public places project that she worked with the aquarium on, and I'm going to have Nate pull up your jellyfish. One moment.
I was very fortunate that my first permanent piece was with Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium. We're developing a new aquarium, and they have like one of the best jellyfish biologists in the country working there, and so somehow they put a call out for artists who'd be interested in applying. So they had the you just apply, and then they make a choice, and they chose 3 people, and then we had to create a proposal for it. So it was really interesting for me. I felt I've worked for a number of artists, and from my school, Rhode Island School of Design, and usually the first public art piece they do, they don't make any money because they propose something extravagant and large for the situation. And I followed suit with that. So I didn't really make a lot of money per se, but
Oh, you didn't?
no, not really. But especially because I had to work with engineers and also a firm a company that would produce the metal that I needed and install the artwork. So that took a lot of the money from the call. But the aquarium was amazing, and they could tell I was going above and beyond, so they would remove things that I had to take care of. Like I had to install my own lighting, buy my own lighting. They took that away from me. There was a few other things as well. But it was an interesting space because you could view the sculpture from 5 different places. Above it, underneath it, from 4 different places underneath it as well. And it was had to be jellyfish. And I spent a lot of time with this jellyfish, with Chad Widmer, who's a biologist at the aquarium. And he let me study the jellyfish and talk to him. And he raises jellyfish, so they're in all different stages of their life. And I'm not a big jellyfish person, but I loved being able to delve into the science behind it and to really investigate before I had to make a proposal. That made a big difference. And just working with the architects and with the, I had to get a business license in Tacoma as well. Although I lived in Seattle, I had to get a business license down there. And I had to get my insurance to transport the artwork. Even though I wasn't transporting the artwork, the place I hired was transporting the artwork. I still had to get that for my license as well.
Pause right there. I saw a lot of faces shake their head, and that you had to buy a business license in Tacoma. I think that that's one thing that has changed in my 25 years, is you do have to buy a business license no matter what if you're working in a new city.
Whatever city.
You have to buy it. It usually is a very quick process.
Yeah, not expensive. I mean,
$40.
I don't know. I don't remember. $100
Sub
bucks.
100. Yeah,
It's not that bad.
Yeah, but just as far as like those unexpected surprises that can trigger you to how exhausting a public art project can be, it's part of it. It's just part of it.
I was very, very, very fortunate in that my method of construction in this case is using very small parts and linking them together with wire, so they're not fused together to make a larger form. When you suspend artwork above people's heads, you need to get a pass on the engineering. So if one of my glass pieces breaks and falls, theoretically, it wouldn't hurt a baby. And so I was very lucky in this case. I could make large sculptures without them weighing as much because I have all these perforated glass pieces. And I developed a new way of working. So the sort of like arms of the jellyfish or tentacles are actually stainless steel with glass slipped over it, so that
nice.
that you can hide the stainless steel. And I designed those pieces with clear ridges on the outside because I knew I could never light all the tentacles. So I had to make something that could collect the light from around it, because there's natural light on one side and not on another. But it was an interesting process. My original design had oral arms, which is like the frilly stuff in a jellyfish, but I couldn't figure out, I didn't have time or it wasn't enough money to make it out of glass. And so I proposed using
out of hand-blown glass.
hand-blown glass. Yeah, these are not
glass elements.
They're glass elements that are all hand-blown as opposed to industrially created. But I wanted to use plastic or maybe recycled plastic, and they were not interested in that. They did not want to deal with that, and especially because it's hanging in an aquarium. And this is a problem because all your metal's going to rust, everything gets exposed to salt. So the wire that I use in my construction is copper. So it'll maybe get a verdigris, like green, but it doesn't rust or degrade. So all the metal had to be stainless steel. And so, you have to really respond to exactly what they want. And, deadlines are pushed back. But I felt very comfortable working with the company that no longer exists anymore, that they created the metal work and they hung it for me. But I learned a lot from that time. And now, I even hang my own stuff in situations now because I feel confident in my abilities. But I had to learn from them first a little bit how to do it right.
Yeah. Scissor lift. And then how many points are attached to the ceiling?
For each piece,
a 12-point
there's
contact?
3 points.
3 point, yeah.
3 points, maybe 4 on some.
Yeah.
But so I had like a loop put in strategic places to suspend the artwork. And I also had to design it in my studio where I lived on the Bemis building. They have 33.5-inch doorways. Not double doorways. So I had to design it so it could fit in and out of that doorway as well. And that's you have to, because otherwise it would not leave my studio. So.
Question for you. You were talking about one of the companies you'd worked with no longer exists. So thinking of maintenance in the long term, how would you account for that?
It wouldn't affect the maintenance so much as that.
Or replacement if something was to happen there.
Oh, well, I worked with their engineer and their metal worker, but that engineer's still around, and that was somebody who did not like emails, so I had to do a lot of phone calls with them. Like the technology thing, he's of an age that he didn't like that, so you have to learn the right way to communicate with people, and he's kind of, cranky. It was interesting working with him. But as far as maintenance goes, they don't need to maintain it. It just takes a brush, maybe every year, or if you have an air gun or something to just get the dust to come off of it. And as far as what happens if something happens, I don't know. I think that they could just rent a scissor lift, and I could hire a few people to deal with it myself. Because even if one connection severs, there's 2 others, so it might go on the side or something, but it wouldn't be too bad, I don't think.
And you had to carry the insurance on that?
I carried the insurance on that. I had to get the transportation insurance, which I just let go of this year, trying to pare down costs and stuff. So, but I feel like it was a really good problem-solving situation for me, especially knowing that people had to see it from so many angles, like how to make it visually interesting. I still meet people and they call it the octopus. Yeah. So there's 6 arms on them, so not a lot of observation, but they are after sea nettles, which are all over the ocean, but we have them here in the Salish Sea in a beautiful orange and white kind of color. So it was fun. So I did also, part of making this work was that I wanted to draw the community in, although it was not part of, and this cost me more money as well, it wasn't part of what they asked for. I wanted to work with Hilltop Artists, which is the same people who worked with Diane Hansen for your project as well. So those are young people in the community that join a glass club, and this club teaches them how to work with glass, but also keeps an eye out on them and supports them within the community if there's destabilization within the family structure or whatnot, to help them get through school and to help them from the age of 13 to 21, if you're a member, helps you all during that time of your life. And I'm so proud to be involved with Pilchuck Glass School, who really has developed some programs to educate these kids further, because they're not getting like an art school education, and they're in high school mostly. So, but I worked with them in the community at their spot directly, Wilson High School, and as well the Museum of Glass. And I worked, and I brought, or the museum paid for Chad Widmer to come with me, because my goal is to teach people about ocean ecology. So Chad came with me to the school and also to the museum, and he talked about jellyfish and the scientific background of them and their relevance, et cetera. And so that was really exciting to be able to educate the students a little bit about the project before they helped me with the project. And so now I feel like members of the community in Tacoma will have this connection for their lives, and they can talk to their children about it too when they come to this public space and say, like, I helped make that, or, you know. So it gives it more relevance to a certain extent.
And that huge connection to place.
Yes.
And investment, like an individual child's investment into their place. That you can
And to a
add
place lots of children go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So neat. I'm wondering, I have 4 cards in my hand, 4 lucky cards for our last few questions to address. And Kate, since you have the microphone, I'm wondering if you can talk us a little bit about your project, because it involves so much collaboration. And
My Protokelp project, that's on view now at Method Gallery until October 19th. I think that's the last day.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. There are a few grants out there where you can just dream big. And so it was the Office of Arts and Culture. I applied for a city artist grant to create an installation in Seattle that celebrates kelp. Like, I'm a big, I grew up on a boat in the Bahamas and the Virgin Islands, so a lot of my work has to do with the water. Moving here 30 years ago and doing a bit of diving, I was just blown away by the seaweeds. We have 22 varieties of kelp. Kelp is just big seaweed, and they are just amazing underwater. They're just so elegant and beautiful and suspended in the water column, and gorgeous, and so important to the environment and important to all the sea life and the ecosystems in this area. And we have different ones on the inner coast than the outer coast. So I wanted very much to invest in doing some artwork. Usually with my public work, I try to promote ocean ecology, not my private object work, kind of, that
Nice.
I resell to, that I sell to people, hopefully. So this work, I wanted to reach into the community and ask for 3 words of appreciation for kelp. And I did this through advertisement in the Stranger, social media, and I partnered with the Seattle Aquarium, because I volunteered there for 7 years. I partnered with their beach naturalist program, and I went onto the beach with the Seattle Aquarium beach naturalists, who are all volunteers. And I brought a clipboard, and I went around and cold asked people to please give me 3 words of appreciation for kelp. And if they didn't want to give me the words on the spot, I had a QR code that led to a place they could just email them to me. And so I collected those over a period of time, and then I created this sort of proto-kelp being sort of the idea of a growth system in kelp, because there's so many different kinds. So I just created glass tubes and chopped them up into smaller pieces. They were eventually shown threaded onto rope in a large installation in this great space that's volunteer-run Method Gallery down near Pioneer Square. And I put onto the glass these words that I was given. I gathered about 300 words, and there were a lot of repeats of things like slimy and and salty and different words describing kelp, because I would ask kids and adults and everyone in between. But it's hard. It's, you know, I'd love to make a public artwork that encompasses the input of everyone around. But I could use this as a tool to, the QR code brought you to a page that talked about the project, but it also you could investigate further, and it had a lot more information about kelp in the area, reforestation projects, and working on developing, like how this part of the country, we're working on trying to develop seaweed farms with indigenous seaweed farmers, and some really amazing things that are happening to try to restore kelp in our area, because we're losing it for many different reasons. But my show is more about celebrating kelp. And so I put these words on a large suspended sculpture. I had a smaller model in the space, and as well a sort of model of lungs with sort of the bronchi being green tubes, green and gold tubes, with also the words inscribed onto that. So it was my first time, you know, as I said, bringing that public words into the small objects or larger objects that are in a gallery. And it was just very exciting to work with the public and to see how it brought a different light to the sculptures, as opposed to being just an object, but now an object with words on it. But I collaborated with someone I was did teamwork with for another temporary public artwork, and she was the person who brought the words to life for me, because I'm not a graphic artist. So that teamwork and collaboration as well. Thank you very much.
That was great, because what I'm hearing, and to harken back to when we began today, that was one way you were able to leverage your other grant into another opportunity. Was that something that you had strategized beforehand, or did that fall into place as the year went on?
I think that I proposed the words being part of it, but I did not know how they were going to get onto the glass so much. And so I was very fortunate my friend had time, and I could hire her to help me for 3 weeks. And we worked well together, so we discovered how it was going to happen. And it was like through tattoo transfer paper, which is
oh my God,
weird.
Okay, I'm back on there. And then when you worked with the Seattle Arts, did you know
Office of Arts and Culture?
Office of Arts and Culture. Thank you. Did you know that you were going to use that grant as part of your process for your method exhibition?
I had not
like,
secured the method show yet.
Okay, and so more specifically, for this original grant, did you have to say where you were going to use the final art piece?
No, it just had to be a public, it had to be shown in a public space. And it was a grant more for, not a public space, but I had to have a public event wherever it was. And that it was at a gallery and it could have multiple openings.
You did have, that was in the writing.
Has to have public, it had to have public engagement, like a public opening free for people to come. And as well, I had to partner with an institution that was not an arts institution to create, to kind of make it more juicy, I guess, or that they wanted that. And I can always, with my work, I try to emphasize that science and art connection.
Yeah.
But this was a great opportunity, and just yesterday I did a talk with the woman who runs the Seattle Aquarium Beach Naturalist Program, who's a photographer as well. I brought her in as a panelist to discuss promoting knowledge of ocean ecology and science through art. And it was such a great discussion. And I think we've actually come up with some dream ideas that we might need to try to develop. And I think that was the thing about this grant. It was about dreaming about something and having that financial backing to make it happen. I would not have been able to do that by myself. So I'm very grateful.
That's great. And I think what I've also heard here is you had to use it in a very public place.
And I want to use the images from it to apply to do a forest. Now I have one piece, but I'd like to do a forest in a space where it could be permanent, or maybe just a museum show, but something that I could reach out again and include more people and keep including that. I almost have a residency in Japan to do the same thing, so you get the Japanese language in there, and I don't know, it's interesting and a new way for me to work. But
yeah, good luck.
Yeah,
good luck. We have just a few more questions because you touched on getting paid. So I'm going to ask this question, and then Jennifer, we're going to end it. You're going to be our grand finale, okay? So the question that I want to make sure artists are aware of before we leave today is, in these agreements, in these contracts, what is the bullet points to the invoicing? Like, how do they get paid? Because some of what I've heard for first times, they're like, wait, how do I get paid? And then how do they use it for their cash flow when they have to buy their supplies to make the artwork? So let's give them some bullet points of how to handle the invoicing process and how that looks on the agreement so they know ahead of time. Yeah, let's do the round, please.
Sure. So I talked about, with Arts West specifically, there's a design contract and a commission contract. So they're just very clear deliverables at stage gates, basically. So in the design phase, you visiting the site, that is once that's completed, there is a payment. When you come up with an initial design and that is reviewed with your committee, that is a payment. And when you come up with a final design that is approved by your committee, and we all know that we've all aligned on it, that is a payment. So I would say, whether you're with whatever organization you're working with, having very clear stage gates, right? And having very clear, this is the deliverable and therefore there is a payment is helpful. When you move into the commission phase, the number of payments there kind of varies because different artist process varies. So some artists, there's always the initial, we need to buy canvas, so we need to buy material.
Right.
So that first payment is like 30%, right? Because you have a lot of stuff to do. And then maybe there's like I'm halfway through fabrication, I've painted 4 out of 7 panels, right? And here's evidence of that, and therefore there's a payment. And then there's usually a payment once you've installed, and there's photography supporting that. And then sometimes there's a payment, let's say, just most of our organizations have almost like a retainage period where 30 days afterwards, nothing fell down. Things stayed where you put them.
Right.
Nothing peeled, nothing did something untoward. And then there's a final payment after that. So it's whichever organization you're working with, you want to make sure your payment structure is clear and your deliverable to get that payment is also clear. And that it works with your timeline.
And is it typical, as we address the answer, is it the typical like net 15, net 30?
For public agencies, it's usually a net 30.
Cool.
And the other piece of that is pay attention to your deliverables, but also don't forget to invoice us. If you forget to invoice us, we can't pay you. We're a public entity, and we must have that invoice in hand before a check can be written to you.
And on the invoice, typically would be the agreement number.
Yeah, the agreement number, what task you've completed. Whatever deliverables are spelled out in your agreement, like you need to write a report about this particular task, how you accomplished it, or whatever the deliverable is. It will say in your agreement how you're supposed to send your deliverable over.
And this is important for artists. There's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to the funding. And so the paperwork has to be as clear as your images that you're applying with. You know, invoice numbers, just very clear.
These are public funds when you're working with a public agency, and we have to be good stewards of those funds, and we have to show our work.
Can I ask a quick question then?
Yes.
So like when an artist works with a client, you know, to get a commission or whatever, you know, they would probably have their own kind of contract with that client. So how does that merge with contract that the artist signs with, you know, the public art contract? And does that
A lot of times, a gallery will be involved with that, and so the gallery is sort of responsible for minding the artist.
Yeah, I would say if it's an outright purchase, then it's with the gallery. If it is a commission where you are creating new work specific for a site, then the contract is usually with the commissioning body and the artist. Does that make sense? So even if you have typical contract language, as she mentioned, because we are public entities, we have standard contracts that you would be signing with the commissioning body.
I have definitely signed contracts with clients directly as well that are for someone's home and not a public space. And they can be very simple.
With the same type of deliverables and the same payment schedule. 50% to start, 30% to start, and then to see it. But to even back up originally, you know, we talked about just the letter of intent. So just having a scope of work that's out with, you know, an agreement of what's going to happen, and then the payment scheduled after that. Like, you need payment in advance to start, and then once it ships or once you're there installing it, could be two other ways to look at the final payment.
And I think Kate touched on this a little bit. Sometimes when you're a public artist, you don't do every single bit of the work. You may have to hire somebody else to fabricate. You may have to hire somebody else to install it. So those would be subcontractors under your contract, which you would be responsible for.
You would be, yeah. Does anybody have anything to add before Jennifer brings us home?
Just that I think in my realm, I'm trying to guide developers and corporate clients to go more towards the ArtsWall model, where we have a design contract to start and then move to a fabrication contract. Historically, the last 10 years, I've seen them be reluctant to, like, they really want to keep it as clean and simple as possible and just have one contract. So that typically is, during the contract phase, a lot of opportunity for negotiation. When you are looking at that contract and you see they're proposing a deliverable and a payment schedule, if you need that to be something different, raise that, red flag it, say, let's talk about this, here's what I was thinking. And it's just a negotiation, see what can work for both parties.
Especially if you have to work with a foundry or something that may be out of your control.
You need
as
a
an
lot
artist.
more money up front.
Right, yeah, I have a friend who did some work for Bellevue, and the price doubled in the time that they were making the model to go to the foundry to be cast and stuff. So sometimes things aren't in your control in that regard.
They're not. So that's part of, we had realizing that we're working with people. So just remember, you have to call them and say, that, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this, or this price just got jacked up. And it was one of the questions that I put out today. Do you think you're a good negotiator? I think every artist needs to be a negotiator, because they need to stand up for what they're trying to get out of this agreement. The artwork, you know, we need your artwork. It's going to serve a purpose. It's going to be a bridge in the community. It's going to be an educational tool. It's going to make somebody happy. It's going to shift a perspective, but you just need to make sure that you've got at least 5 points from everybody today about how you can be a better negotiator on the front end of your agreements. And with that, Jennifer can help us with those, like when you're accounting for how much things are going to cost. You know, are you good at negotiating the difference between, hey, I'm giving you a whole year to make this, versus, hey, I need a fabricator, or I need this expedited. Those two prices most likely can be very, very different. And just knowing that, and then knowing where your money is and where you're going to scale it when you're going to need it for projects. And I'd love to have Jennifer take us home here with some of these strategies that can be helpful. And she's also going to introduce, if I may, just introduce more about what she does in the community and more about her advising, because her advising is free. It is free, and it's ninja work, and I just think everybody should be involved and get your number before you go, because it's people working with people, and I've worked with Jennifer, and she has helped me identify several things that I can do better with mine, and particularly with some grant writing. So,
thank you, Jody. All right. Up there is a list of all the topics that I can work with an entrepreneur on. Myself and my SBDC colleagues, and I'll share about the program in a minute, but Jody was talking about cash flow, and I want to remind you all, as has been said, remember to invoice when you are not someone else's bank. When they're not paying you, you're acting as their bank, and your business is like a baby that needs cash instead of milk. You really need to take care of that. So we can work with you on developing a budget, or you can do it however it works for you, but kind of knowing that up front to the best of your ability, having a project plan, those are some best practices. I know it's tedious work, but part of what we do is that we help with that. Business planning, marketing planning, customer relationship management. Nate, go on to the next slide, and I'll share. We do no-cost advising. So I won't actually do your cash flow for you, but I will sit with you, and we'll talk it through, and we'll figure it out, and we'll kind of get it in a format so that you're not going to, you've got risk mitigation for cost overruns, you're thinking through it all, doing the best of your ability, you're making sure you're thinking about what you needed to live on and all of that. So, and then we can help you with goals. It's free because this is your tax dollars at work. This program is a small business administration program. It's been around almost 50 years. It's in every state. It's in every county. So if you're watching virtually and you're not in King County, there's someone like me. I'm one of 40 folks in the state. And we'll guide you. We can coach you. We can tap you into resources. And we can provide training, and all of it's free. We also have free market research. So I heard someone mention if you're trying to research a community or an area or an industry, or you want to know more about your own industry, we have a team at our lead office that can provide customized market research reports for you. If you're in the business of business development, that's kind of what we offer. And the Department of Commerce is also a state funding partner, and the City of Shoreline is phenomenal. So this is a partnership of federal, state, and local. So the City of Shoreline has brought the Small Business Development Center to this area. It's the first time we've had a program here in North King County in the SBDC's history. So I encourage you all to take advantage of it. And there's a couple takeaways I wanted to leave you with. If you go to the next slide, Nate. We've been talking a lot about relationships today and how important they are. And one thing that can give you confidence in your relationships is setting up somewhat of it's called a relationship management system. This is something you get to create. This isn't something that you have to make it look like this, but basically you have your outreach that goes out, and someone hits you up, phone, at your gallery, in person, Instagram, website inquiry. They've touched you. They're in front of you. This is called a prospect, or this could be a potential funder. What happens next? You want to create at every step along the way what questions you want to ask them, what information you need, what you'd like to know about them, what you'd want them to know about you, and you want to invite them as to what their next step should be in building a relationship with you. And you get to determine what that next step will be. If it's on Instagram and you want to invite them to your website, or do you want to invite them to a show? Do you want to invite them to call you? So you let them know what you would like to ask next. And it just goes through from then you might follow up with more information, or you might invite them to do something else. Then you want to track the information you learn about them as far as what are their values, what type of art are they interested in, what artists inspire them, how did they hear about you, would they like to learn more about that, how best to keep in touch with them. And I encourage all of you just to kind of create that system, and you've got potential past customers, past agencies that you've done work with, people that you've met, artists that you'd like to collaborate with. You could have all these different lists, and you can decide when you would like to reach out to them again and kind of create that system. And that will give you confidence. It gives them confidence in working with you. And it's called customer relationship management. It's all about customer service. And that's something I encourage you guys to create. And then the last tip I want to share with you is on the last slide. Oh, this is the market research. So this is the training that we offer. So if you sign up to work with our program, you have access to, again, the research, which someone like me can help you frame a research request. But there's also training. So it's online webinars taught by my other colleagues that work with entrepreneurs and on all topics: search engine optimization, getting financing, writing a business plan, branding, e-commerce, developing your website. You name it, it's all free, and it's meant to help make a difference in your business. So that's one of the benefits of working with us. All right, next slide. Okay, I wanted to end with this. This is the very important work that you all do. You're producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. And as I talked before, you're selling an experience, perspective, feeling. And I'm going to speak about it from like a customer buying your art perspective. Something that I want you to be aware of when you're selling is that this is something that is a want to have. It's not something that is a have to have, like a toilet for your house or milk for your coffee. It is something that is a want to have, and in the buyer's mind, there can be a whole host of objections that are going to come up. I don't deserve it. I shouldn't spend the money on it. My partner might not like it. All these things that they're hesitating, and you think they're maybe don't like your art or what have you, but it's really, you want to, in that relationship that you're building with them, remember that this is a luxury that they might be buying, even though we see art as a necessity, and I believe it is. But from a purchase perspective, there's a little bit of justification and objections that you have to overcome. So you want to build a relationship slowly, get to know them, invite them to be part of whatever communication tools you use, so that in time you can turn that interested person into a raving fan and into a purchaser. And it could be that it might just be a financial barrier that they don't want to talk to you about. You might want to talk about a payment plan, or say, hey, listen, if you're interested in maybe hearing about potential payment plans or new things that come up, here's a way to keep in touch with me. So I wanted you to know that what you do is really valuable, and you want to find your tribe. You want to put the communication out there via identifying who you are and what you stand for in all the ways of marketing best practices, which you can delve into a little bit more, and then have a system to build that long-term relationship. So maybe 10 years down the road, your art is switched, and you've got a different type of art. You've got your little Rolodex card, or you can go look up and you can say, you've got your hashtag, you say, so-and-so is interested in this type of art or this type of artist, and I've switched here, and you've got their contact, and you can reach out to them and let them know, so that you have this, it's called retaining a customer, reoccurring customer. You want to just build that relationship long-term with them, and a system like this can help however it looks to you. And that's what I wanted to really leave you with, because I really want people to find you, and then to have your raving fans be able to stay in touch with you, and you with them, because you never know if they're going to hear about an opportunity that they can refer you to, or a partner or a collaboration or anything like that. So I think that sort of is it.
That's great.
Anything you want to add?
That is great. You know what? I think there is. I would like to add a little bit more about the CRM.
Okay.
Because it can serve as a way to, it has multiple ways that it can serve an artist business. So does anybody here have a CRM ServiceNow. You have one. Do you have one?
Uh,
You have an Excel.
I have a list, and I manage my MailChimp, like so.
Oh, yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah. These customer service management, sorry? What is a CRM? Customer Relations Management System. Oh. It's a way to track who you're speaking with and who's interested in your art or who has acquired your work. I think a system like that is a must for any company, and especially for artists, because what I can leave you with is I don't help artists make one sale, I help artists make a second sale, and so that's always what I address a collector with first. I'm starting a relationship, so how do they want to keep in touch? Okay, and then as we start conversating, that can lead to one sale, but my favorite thing is when they come back for the second one. Either they want a gift, they're buying it for a friend, they have an anniversary, and those types of communications, that type of tracking, you can put in this CRM. So even it's as simple and as inexpensive as an Excel, you can go through and track, oh, I talked to Bob today, I talked to Joe today, I talked to Julie today, and you can be able to track what you said and what's happening. So let's say Julie bought a piece that was titled Reverence. Okay, great. But in the future, if you're thinking about your series titled Reverence and that it might be a great companion piece, you can go back to your CRM and say, hey, I have this great companion piece. It's from the Reverence series. What do you think about this? It's putting together curations of your work and giving it its best life forward. Another way to think about a CRM is you can do a lot more tags and a lot more filter systems with systems today than I think you ever have. And Jennifer and I were talking about that because a lot of times when I first started at the gallery, I would alphabetize my clients. I had 600 clients, but I couldn't remember their name exactly, but I remembered their emotional attachment. I remembered that they loved the vibe of the Reverence series. So I started tracking people through their series or through the colors that they were attracted to. So with these CRMs, you're going to have to work with the alphabet in some way, but just know that you can tweak it to how you are going to remember it, either from the series or the vibe or even anniversary dates if something's, if it's Earth Day and those people in your system are attracted to Earth Day. That's another way of just being able to tag people. So you can communicate with them and continue your relationship with them. My microphone, yes. Yes, please.
Are you finding Salesforce, or are there other CRM softwares that are affordable that are good for artists specifically?
I use a template that was made in FileMaker, and FileMaker can be adaptable.
I definitely know of people who are organizations that use Salesforce. I think tailoring your CRM to your size of your organization. So Salesforce is a giant hammer.
It's big.
It's huge,
big.
and they can tailor it all that you want. But Excel might be useful if you can just figure out. At minimum, it's basically like creating a rubric, right? Here's my list of clients or customers or collectors. And here are certain things that I can think of how to sort them, right? So that might be color. It might be environmental interest. And that might be as simple as just having that in a spreadsheet and then sorting by columns, right? So think of tailoring your CRM to the scope you have as well. I also think about it with respect to organizations, right? Those of us on the PM side and how we could leverage CRMs better. The last part of your question was for artists specifically. I don't think I have a good answer to that because I don't think we know what works best for us yet.
Art Logic is another one you can take a look at. It depends on how many people are in your list to make it affordable for you and to make it in your wheelhouse, your skill set. Because if it's too unwieldy, you're not going to use it, and that's not the point. What I do like about the Excel is that this is probably getting into our part 2, but it's a way that you can use it as provenance as well. So if Bob and Sue buy the piece, then you can go in, you have that piece, and you have their name next to it. So if an art appraiser 10 years from now is appraising that piece, they can, you know that it went to that piece, and it just brings the provenance directly there with no questions. And it'll hold up in a court of law, and it'll be easy because you'll be able to know how to use it.
I just add that I have a personal CRM for my own art business, and I've done it on the creative artist approach of using a tool that wasn't necessarily intended that way, but this is how I use it. MailChimp, which is, newsletter management system. Inside MailChimp, you can, I think, have 1,000 subscribers for free. It doesn't mean they have to all be on one list. So if I have a new contact...
Oh, you so tricky.
I have like 6 or 7 different MailChimp groups. So I can email, here's all my sculpture artists that I need to refer this call to, or here's the people who are interested in my work that I met through my studio. They've actually visited my studio, and I will drop that email sign up to that list. So using free tools creatively is something I think artists do really well. So there's a recommendation of a free tool of it's a place to start, and if you get beyond 1,000 email addresses, then you can maybe look at a different system that you pay for. Mm-hmm. But it's a good place to start.
Okay. Today has been so great. I feel like everybody has learned something. If you didn't learn something, raise your hand. It's a success. I want to thank all the panels here today. Nate running, David running, thank you. We have a little bit more time. We have plenty of refreshments, so I'd love everybody to decompress and be able to share anything else. And we have a question. Can I add all of you to my mailing list? Yeah, let's do it. I've got pen and papers, and we can exchange, and now you can turn your phones back on so we can just tap, right? Yeah, yes. Sound good? All right, thank you, everyone.
If I can just, while I have your attention, just a couple of quick heads up about upcoming events. Next weekend, for all of your musician friends, or for those of you who are also musicians, we have our 6th annual Shoreline Music Summit at the famous the studio is not famous, but London Bridge Studios is where lots of famous music has been made. And they're generous enough to host this event there every year. It's really turned into a really great, I don't know what's going on. It's about music, and I'm not a musician. I work for the government, and it's no longer something I even understand. It's that relevant to musicians. So that is on Eventbrite, as well as, again, Jody is organizing this glass blowing demonstration pop-up event for us in October, also on Eventbrite. So I highly encourage you all to come out for that. And just hope you'll keep in touch with us here if we can be a part of your journey at the City of Shoreline. Oh, and I want to say, did you want to say thank you?
Yeah. I wanted to thank all of you for being here in person today. Thank everybody online. Thank all of our panelists for being involved in this. Thank Jody for putting this all together. And also thank David Purdy, who's the man behind the scenes doing IT today. Without him, we would not be live, and you wouldn't be able to see this later on YouTube or the Shoreline channel.